My wife, learning I was infertile, grew distant and eventually left for another man. Her family and friends reached out, but I refused to help. It's common to hear statements like, "I never saw it coming." That's exactly how it was for me. Though I had been married to my wife for 4 years, I honestly thought we were doing well. For the most part, I thought we were in accord. We had a life plan in place. The difficulty is that I felt we both wanted children. We started serious discussions about it as soon as we got married. She would continuously emphasize her wish for 2 or 3 children, droning on about the names we would give them, nursery decor, and other details. She would even spend hours online planning our future children's lives, browsing baby goods and clothing. It kept us linked and provided a topic for discussion. We were excited to begin this new chapter in our lives together, and everything seemed to be going as planned. But then we got some horrible news, which devastated me. After a few months of attempting to conceive, we went to the doctor to figure out what was happening. To shorten a long story short, it was me. The doctor essentially told us that our chances of naturally becoming parents were slim because my count was far too low. It felt like a stomach punch. I felt unworthy. Our entire set of plans went in an instant. The news hit me hard, incredibly hard. I found myself in a bad situation for a while. I was a total catastrophe at first, but therapy eventually helped. At first, she appeared to be quite supportive, saying that it didn't matter and that she would be okay with just the 2 of us. However, there was something off about the way she said it from the outset. She appeared to have dropped it way too quickly. She was all about creating a family 1 minute and then suddenly said she didn't need children to be happy. I understand that people's opinions evolve, but her entire behavior struck me as weird. She had stopped talking about children since she was preoccupied with baby names. Furthermore, it appeared that she began to perceive me in a different light. She would suddenly start making tiny barbs at me, something she had never said before. She would make comments about how I wasn't taking care of myself, how I should exercise, or how I should be more productive at home. Yes, I could have gained a few pounds, but it appeared like she was always looking for reasons to accuse me of something. When I asked her about the dramatic change in attitude, she dismissed it. She said that I was very sensitive and was just imagining things. But I knew there was something wrong. She was not like the woman I married, who would sit with me for hours discussing our future plans. She wasn't particularly harsh, but she had a frigid demeanor about her, as if she had already checked out mentally and was only acting. I think as time passed, I grew to trust her when she assured me that everything was fine. I didn't want to come across as needy or insecure, so I stopped pursuing the topic. In any event, after a few years, we were barely getting by. We had fallen into a practice of rarely discussing anything serious. We seemed like housemates rather than husband and wife. She would consistently ignore my attempts to discuss alternative options, such as adoption or surrogacy, by declaring that she did not want to consider them. I never believed her when she said, "As long as we're together, I'm happy." She seemed more interested in convincing herself than convincing me. She suddenly informed me that she wanted to go on a girls' trip. It wasn't unusual for her to travel with her buddies. She had done it several times previously, and I had always supported her. She had long expressed a desire to visit to America with her friends while we were living in Brighton. We had built trust over the years, so I didn't give it much attention. I ensured she had everything she needed, helped her pack, and took her to the airport. I remember her final remarks before she left. She looked at me and said, "Thank you for being so supportive." I found it unusual that she would say that when I hadn't done anything particularly spectacular. But she appeared so earnest that I discounted it as a simple expression of gratitude. That night, I stayed up to ensure everything ran perfectly. I called her when she came, kept myself busy about the house, watched TV, kept track of the time, and waited for her to text me to let me know she had arrived. Her flight was supposed to take about 9 hours, so I wasn't too concerned at first. When I realized her flight had landed, I contacted her to check in. The phone continued ringing but no one answered. I didn't give it much attention. I figured she was fatigued and had gone straight to her hotel to rest. However, as AM dawned and I still hadn't heard from her, a gnawing worry crept in. I assumed she was merely busy or her phone was on quiet, so I tried calling again and texted her a few times. After a few more hours of radio silence, I was completely freaked. Finally, I called her sister to see if she'd heard from her. Nothing. I was starting to panic. In the hopes that something had gone wrong with her phone or that she just hadn't had time to check in, I even called her purported travel companions. However, they were equally bewildered as I was. When I contacted, they said they hadn't joined her on the vacation. They were actually sitting in a cafe just 2 streets away from our house, drinking their morning coffee. That's when it really hit me. She was not traveling with any other girls. She had no friends with her. She hadn't traveled with anyone. She had simply disappeared. My stomach felt like it had fallen through the floor as I sat there holding the phone. I couldn't understand it. Why would she tell me that lie? Why didn't she tell me before leaving? I tried to tell myself that it was a mistake. Perhaps she had missed a connecting flight or was delayed due to an emergency. But, deep inside, I knew the truth. She had planned it. Her stating, "Thank you for being so supportive," and the entire story of a girl's trip were all part of whatever plan she had in mind. I was at a loss for what to do. It seemed like I was locked in a nightmare, unable to awaken. I'd never married a woman like her. I didn't even recognize the person. The coldness, the fact that she had stopped discussing our future, and the subtle jabs at my appearance and health, all of this immediately made sense. I just hadn't noticed. Perhaps I didn't want to see that she'd been drifting away for a time. I just sat there that night, staring at my phone, waiting for a call, a text, anything. However, nothing happened, and I knew it wouldn't. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, and when I awoke the next morning, I assumed it was all a bad dream. However, when I noticed that her side of the bed was vacant, reality hit in. She had actually left. After packed her bag, she vanished. The promises I had made to myself the previous evening, maybe she was late, maybe her phone died, were no longer legitimate. She had plainly planned it. She wanted to leave. I was in utter denial for the first few days. I kept contacting her phone, wanting to hear her voice and get an explanation. I even left messages, hoping she'd respond. I struggled to find words half of the time, but I kept trying. However, all I got in return was quiet. Strangely, the silence made matters worse. It was as if I'd always been a stranger to her, left alone to figure out what had gone wrong. Her family was originally as astonished as I was. They had not heard from her, and her mother had no idea of her plans. In the end, I visited her family more times than I could count, desperate to meet with her mother and gain some answers. They must have felt bad for me. When I couldn't bring myself to cook, her mother would make dinners for me. She occasionally allowed me to stay at their home. She'd sit with me as I talked about all the little things that didn't make sense, trying to figure out why my life had suddenly become so complicated. To be honest, there were times when I felt too numb to talk. I would simply sit there in solitude. I alternated between wrath, sorrow, and guilt. What went wrong? I kept asking myself. Was there a sign that I missed? Wasn't I paying enough attention to her? On certain days, I would go over all of our disputes and chats, attempting to figure out what had caused her to leave. I kept thinking about what I should have done better to save our marriage. It may sound dramatic, but I was possessed by the desire to find it out. I clung to the hope that obtaining the answer would somehow improve everything. I barely slept. I barely ate. My productivity began to decrease. People began to notice. When people inquired about my well-being, I would dismiss it as I was preoccupied with personal concerns. Admitting the truth, that my wife had abandoned me without saying anything, was too embarrassing. I eventually confided in a few close pals. They did their utmost to divert me by taking me out and pushing me to move on. But even when I was among them, my thoughts kept going to her. Where was she? Why wasn't I enough for her to stay? One of the most difficult parts was the constant inquiry from others, neighbors, relatives, acquaintances, and even former coworkers who had learned I was married. Each time someone inquired, "How's married life treating you?" Or, "How's your wife?" It was like peeling off a new scab. I'd simply grin and fib, assuring them everything was all right. But each time I said that lie, it felt heavier. Finally, treatment proved to be the only thing that helped. I'd never gone before, but after months of barely functioning, I realized I couldn't do it alone. I needed to speak with someone who was neutral and did not carry the weight of our common experience. I contacted a therapist and began attending weekly sessions. It helped. I talked constantly about her fury, betrayal, and the hole she had left behind. I talked about the sleepless nights, about lying awake and replaying every scene over and over. The therapist let me realize something I had not been able to accept. If she really wanted to stay, she would have. It was not my fault. She decided to depart. That was a difficult pill to swallow. For a long time, I believed myself that I was flawed and had somehow turned her away. However, I eventually came to see things differently. I chose to ignore her long-standing coldness and isolation, believing that things would improve on their own. I had convinced myself that if I just kept my cool and put in enough effort, I could save our marriage by myself. The revelation that I couldn't, that nothing was ever enough, hurt. As time passed, I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. It wasn't until she left that I realized how much I'd lost in our marriage. I had always tried my hardest to make her happy and to keep our home life comfortable. But now, with so much free time, I'm at a loss for what to do. So I began revisiting old pastimes that I had long forgotten. I tried making fresh meals. I went to the gymnasium. I started reading novels that I'd been putting off for years. Finally, my work improved. At first, I was just going through the motions, barely keeping up. However, when I began to feel more like myself, I increased my effort at work. It was one of the few things I still felt in control of, and it gave me a sense of success. I'd always been brilliant at what I did, but now I threw myself entirely into it. The extra hours, the focus, they paid off. I got a promotion. Something I would not have accomplished if I had spent all of my time drowning in my sadness. Nevertheless, there were difficult days. A picture, an old movie ticket stub, or another minor memory would abruptly transport me back to the past. I'd find myself wondering if she ever thought about me or regretted what she'd done. But as time passed, those instances got fewer and farther apart. Each time, it grew little easier to let go. I also reconnected with people I had lost touch with after getting married. We went trekking. We went to the golf range. I began doing activities that I hadn't done in years. Having friends by my side, people who weren't caught up in the turmoil and could support me without dragging me back into the pain, was a huge comfort. Looking back, I realized I had invested too much of myself in that connection. As her husband, I had lost a huge part of me. When she departed, it felt as if she had stolen a piece of me with her. However, I was gradually rediscovering myself. It was not quick, it was not easy. But I was making progress. At the end of that year, when I looked in the mirror, I saw more than simply a man whose wife had abandoned him. I'd rebuilt. I had survived. I was stronger now. For the first time in years, I felt free to live my life without her shadow lurking over me. And I took pride in it. I genuinely thought I'd moved on from everything. After all of the commotion, things had begun to feel normal again, or as normal as it could be. Work was progressing smoothly. My friends kept me busy. I had a routine down. Even my thoughts of her had disappeared. Sure, there were occasional flashbacks, odd recollections that appeared unexpectedly, but they weren't as often as previously, when everything I did seemed to be linked to her. She was the last person I expected to see standing outside my door on Saturday morning. But there she was. She holds a baby in her arms. I got chilled. It was like witnessing a ghost. For a little while, my brain ceased to operate. She appeared nearly identical, perhaps a touch worn down, but otherwise unchanged. And the way she looked at me, as if she truly believed I would be delighted to see her, moved me. I thought I had stopped caring. But meeting her again resurfaced emotions I had long suppressed. For a minute, I stood there in silence, staring. She smiled as if nothing had happened and asked, "May I come in?" A nerve. After everything she has done, she simply walks up here, expecting me to welcome her back with open arms. However, I kept my cool and told her, "No. You can stay right there." I said that I did not want her in my home, bringing all of the chaos back into the place I had established for myself. Despite her bewildered demeanor, she remained where she was and simply began her story. She began by saying, "I know this may come as a shock, but I wanted to come back and explain everything." Her look was hopeful, as if she genuinely felt I would be eager to listen. I was tempted to simply close the door in her face. Perhaps even laugh. But I was too curious. I was curious about the reason for her disappearance and the tale she had come up with. She went on to say that she had made a mistake in leaving and had now recognized that she had lost the best thing that had ever occurred to her. Not my words, but hers. She claimed that after much thought, and after having this child, she had finally realized what was truly essential in life. After years of ignoring me, it appeared that what was most important had unexpectedly brought her back to my doorstep. "This is our second chance," she said, looking down at the newborn. What I was hearing was incredible. Our second chance? As if this child were some sort of miraculous reset button, allowing us to resume where we left off. I was outraged on the inside, but my expression remained neutral. She went on to suggest that, despite having made a terrible mistake, we could now start over, just the three of us. She wanted us to be a family again. "Why did you leave?" That was the question that had haunted me since she first appeared. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I wasn't sure how long I could do it. Now that she was present, I needed to hear the truth. For years, I tortured myself with unlimited possibilities, attempting to make sense of everything. She hesitated, looking down at her feet, as if embarrassed. Then she finally said it. Or, at least, what she said was true. She stated that she had gone because she wanted a child, And she had found someone who could provide one, because I could not. She spoke nonchalantly, as if it were insignificant, as if she hadn't ruined my life, as if I should simply nod, accept, and go on. She went on to explain that, while the man she had left me for did not remain, she had already given birth and had realized she wanted me back. How convenient. I paused to digest what she was saying. She was standing here, confessing that she had abandoned me, fled with another guy, had his child, and now expected me to simply accept it. To pretend that none of this had ever occurred. So, you left. Found someone else. Had his baby? And now you think you can just come back and pretend like nothing happened? I responded with curiosity. She burst into tears and apologized repeatedly, acknowledging she had made a tremendous mistake. I remained unaffected. She kept talking, attempting to persuade me that she knew she was meant to be with me. That I was the person she actually loved. To be honest, it was difficult to maintain a straight face. She sounded deluded. The desperation was written all over her face. It wasn't love that brought her back. It was terror. Then she attempted to guilt-trip me. She went on and on about how tough it had been for her as a single mother, as if she were the victim in this whole situation. As if her own decisions had not brought her here. She assured me that this time, she was prepared to make it work. She said she needed my help. All I could think was, who does she think I am? I let her continue. I stood there listening. Then I'd had enough. You made your choice a long time ago, I informed her. And now you have to live with it. There's no second chance here. She appeared shocked. As if she had never considered the possibility that I may say no. As if she actually believed she could simply walk back into my life whenever it suited her. Then she felt enraged. Just when I thought she'd finally get it and leave, she lashed out, accusing me of being selfish. She demanded that I give her another chance and let her repair things. She even had the nerve to say, I could have taken half of everything and divorced you back then if I wanted to. And then she said it. The house should still be hers. At that point, I felt a burst of relief. Her disguise had finally slipped. Finally, I was seeing her actual self. I did not argue. I did not yell. I simply looked her in the eye and replied, we're done. You wanted a different life, and now you have it. This is no longer my responsibility, I simply stated, staring at her. Then I closed the door in her face, interrupting her mid-sentence. I was not interested in hearing what else she had to say. As I stood there, listening to her muffled screaming from the other side of the door, I felt strangely calm. She had the ability to shout, cry, and knock at will. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow her back in. The woman I had once loved and married no longer existed. In her place stood a stranger, a self-centered, entitled stranger who believed she could pick up the pieces whenever it suited her. I stepped away from the door and sat down, feeling lighter than I have in years. I assumed that was the end of it. I figured she would eventually understand and walk away. But no. Instead, she began hammering on the door, screaming various things. Her bravery is admirable. She had the guts to stand up and insist that I listen to her. Here. At my door. The one spot I fought to recapture after she abandoned me. At first, I pondered ignoring her and letting her scream until she got exhausted. But then curiosity got the better of me. I was curious what kind of excuses she would come up with this time. So I opened the door. Just enough to let her know I was listening. Not enough to allow her in. She appeared stunned. As if she'd just been smacked. As if she expected me to react differently. As if we were simply having a usual dispute rather than coping with the implications of her abandonment. Then she began into a long monologue. She expressed her willingness to forgive me for closing the door on her. About her desire to start over. She went on and on about how, if we both worked hard, we could get things fixed. And that's when I lost it. I laughed. Not simply a chuckle. A full, sincere, and unrestrained laugh. Because this woman possessed more nerve than I had ever seen. When I did, she snapped. She was enraged. As if I had harmed her. As if I were the one who should feel guilty. You left, I informed her, my tone even. You had your chance, and you threw it all away. I'm not just going to pretend none of that happened because you feel like it. Her face turned crimson. Then she started talking about how lost she had felt after leaving. She discovered her mistake too late. You don't understand how hard it was for me, she told me. I didn't believe any of it. No, I replied. You made the decision to leave. You planned it, you lied about it, and then, you went through with it. Now, I scoffed. Now your regret means nothing. And that's when she finally gave up the act. Her entire demeanor changed. The gloomy, remorseful woman was gone. In her place was the bitter, greedy individual she had always been. She attacked me. She accused me of being harsh and not having the grace to give her another chance. Then she said it. If I'd wanted to, I could have taken everything from you back then. I could have taken half of everything you own. She genuinely stated that. I just stood there, staring at her in bewilderment. This woman, who had abandoned me without saying anything, now claimed she was deserved something for not screwing me over even more. As if she deserved recognition for not being as bad as she could have been. So, what? Am I supposed to be grateful? I requested an explanation. Grateful that you only ditched me and didn't take my stuff too. Her expression shifted between wrath, desperation, and remorse. But I didn't care anymore. That was it. That was the point at which all of the years I had spent questioning myself, wondering if I had done something wrong, vanished. For the first time in years, I saw her as she truly was. I felt free. But she wasn't done. She began pacing my porch, shouting about how I'd regret not giving her another chance. I'd never find somebody like her again. She even tried to make it appear as if I was the one losing, as if she were the prize. It was surreal. This was the same woman who had demolished everything we'd constructed. Yet there she was, acting as if I should be asking her to stay. When she realized I wasn't going to cave, she grew louder. She began ranting about how I forced her to leave in the first place. She claimed that none of this would have occurred if I had been more accepting of the entire kid scenario. Her rationale was perplexing. She was actually implying that I had failed her as a husband because I was unable to conceive. As if this validated her decision to have a child with someone else. The mental gymnastics were incredible. To be honest, I was stunned that she was attempting to blame me for her actions. I glanced at her and commented, "Look, if you wanted a kid that badly, you could have just told me the truth. You didn't have to lie to my face and pretend everything was fine while planning your escape." She gave no response. She simply gazed at me, as if I had hit her. But I did not let her talk. "You made that decision entirely on your own," I continued. "And now you have to live with it. That's not my problem." She made one last attempt. Her face returned to that depressed expression, and she pleaded with me to think about the boy. She said I was being unjust by ignoring him. She tried to make me feel guilty by holding the youngster in her arms. As if I were the villain in this scenario. But I was not buying into it. "I don't know that child," I informed her firmly. "I have nothing to do with him. He's not mine. And neither are you." That was it. I noticed it in her eyes. For the first time, she understood. She understood that I would never change my opinion. I would never allow her back into my life. The wrath in her expression dissipated, to be replaced by something else, perhaps regret. Or maybe she was just frustrated because her manipulation wasn't working. I didn't care. She had expected me to fold, forgive, and accept her back. But she was nothing to me now. She waited there for a few more seconds, as if waiting for me to reconsider my decision. I didn't utter another word. And as it dawned on her that I meant every word, I stood there, observing her. Then I closed the door. This time, I did not wait for her to knock again. This time, I knew in my heart that I'd already made up my mind. There was no turning back. I'm not sure why, but I felt like I had finally won. It ended as I moved away from the door. She'd spent a lot of time attempting to manipulate her way back into my life. But I had freedom. There would be no second chances for either her or us. She was now merely a memory, something I had finally put behind me. And for the first time in years, I felt as like I could breathe again. After so many years of pain and guilt, I felt at peace. And you know what? It was pleasurable. When I closed the door behind her, I felt a strange sensation of calm sweep over me. I no longer felt sad. I was not furious. I wasn't even astonished anymore. It was as if all the years of effort I had put into her had vanished, along with the pain, guilt, and never-ending wondering. I was prepared to go on. Because I had finally received the closure I had never known I needed. This time, it was really over. However, life never ends smoothly. A few days later, I received a text from her mother. She apologized. She expressed her embarrassment at how her daughter had handled everything. She had tried to reason with her, but it was evident that it had not worked. Her mother was a kind woman. She had been kind to me when her daughter departed, and I could tell she was genuinely upset about the situation. I didn't have anything against her. However, I did not want to be dragged back into any of it. So I just answered, "Thanks for checking in," and left it at that. I wasn't going to waste time justifying my decisions, and I wasn't going to give her mother any additional information. She knew it was over because she understood. Over the next few weeks, I discovered bits and pieces via social media and mutual relationships. She had allegedly moved back in with her parents, and things were not going well. The child's father, the man she had left me for, was not involved at all. He had bailed. She was left to figure things out on her own, as he had apparently not committed to the long term. Few people wanted to help her. She'd burned almost every bridge. Her previous acquaintances, many of whom had backed me when she initially went missing, had little sympathy for her. They were not about to get drawn back into her drama. They'd all moved on. And frankly, you can't blame them. Even her parents weren't pleased. They did not have the financial resources to maintain her and the child. I knew this because immediately after her mother texted me, her father called. Curiosity got the best of me. I almost didn't respond. He was clear yet respectful. He added that they were hurting financially and quietly suggested that I might be able to assist them. He spoke about the youngster and how terrible things were for them. "We know you cared about her once," the man added. I listened politely, but the irony of the situation made me laugh within. Then he went on and on about how his daughter only needed a little support to get back on her feet. That's when I joined in. "Your daughter made her choices," I said, my voice calm but forceful. "I am neither in a position, nor in the right frame of mind, to help her." He didn't press the subject. I believe he received the message. Then, out of nowhere, individuals I hadn't communicated with in years, her old friends, began to reach out. Some attempted to use guilt, telling me that she was struggling and that I should find it in my heart to give her another chance. One even had the guts to suggest, "The child requires a father figure. Do not let resentment prevent you from doing the right thing." I refused to back down. I refused to let anyone make me feel guilty about my decision. I'd already given the woman everything I had. Years of self-doubt, trying to be enough, and she'd thrown it all away. Instead of expecting me to save her, she had to accept responsibility for her own actions. The calls and mails gradually slowed and eventually stopped completely. It seems that everyone had finally understood I was serious. That I'd moved on. That I wouldn't get pulled back in. And that's when I really felt at ease. For the first time in years, my life seemed normal. I had friends. My job. My routines. I'd recreated my life on my own terms. It wasn't lavish or glamorous, but it was mine. Ironically, I found myself rediscovering joy in the small things. Things I had overlooked when I was married. I began reading novels that I had planned to read for years. I cooked my own meals. I took long walks. And for the first time, I felt liberated. I didn't need anybody's approval. I wasn't always concerned about someone else's happiness. For once, I arrived first. Every now and then, I would come across someone who knew us both. They'd say, "Hey, whatever happened to her?" I would respond briefly, politely, and change the subject. I didn't need to revisit that part of my life. It wasn't like I was hiding anything. I had previously perfected the capacity to abandon her. The last I heard, things were still not going well for her. She was jumping between her parents' house and sleeping on friends' couches. She couldn't keep a consistent job. Occasionally, someone I barely communicated with would message me, saying she needed aid from anyone who would listen. Some even suggested that she was still hoping I would reconsider. That maybe one day, I'd alter my mind and play father to her child. But that wasn't going to happen. I'd worked too hard to reconstruct my life. She'd made her bed. And I wasn't going to be the one picking up the pieces. Nothing could bring me back into that chapter. I was finished. In the end, I believe I found the closure I needed. She was now facing the repercussions of her own actions. And me? For the first time since she departed, I felt entirely and really free. I'd finally let go of the weight she had left behind. And you know what? I was pleased. Not in a big dramatic way. Just content, and it was enough. Mom sold our dad's house to buy her new husband a boat. Now she's begging me for a place to stay after he left. Behind our backs, Mom sold our dad's house to purchase a yacht for her unemployed new husband, who later left her for someone else. She spent all the money and now begs to live with me. If that's the right description in this context, my 50F mother has had a pretty interesting life. My grandparents felt that women should take care of the home and family, so it was okay that she was never a good student. She still adheres to the same values that she was raised with. At the age of 20, 2 years after graduating from school, she married my dad. She gave birth to my older sister Jasmine, now 29F, when I was 21, and to me Bianca, now 27F, 2 years later. Dad was always closer to my sister and me. He was quite supportive, although he didn't agree with Mom. He made it a point to always be there, enrolled us in a number of extracurricular activities, and pushed us to succeed academically. I enjoyed drawing, so Dad surrounded me with art tools. Dad also made sure my sister never missed a day of soccer practice since he saw her potential there. My mother was tremendously annoyed by the fact that he was constantly there for us. She disapproved of our pastimes. She disliked that we were intellectually minded, and as a result of our nature, and Dad's encouragement, she actually lost a lot of respect in her family. We were disliked by my maternal grandparents in particular. When Dad died when I was 11, everything changed. He died a few days after being hospitalized following an automobile accident. My mother suffered a severe financial and emotional setback as a result, and naturally, so did the rest of us. We were done financially, but I don't want to discuss the mental turmoil we endured since it is irrelevant. We didn't have enough insurance to pay for the thousands of dollars Dad's hospital stay had cost. My mother had no savings of her own because she was unemployed, and the majority of his savings were used to cover the bills. I recall that we had to sell a lot of our belongings a few weeks following his passing. My sister stopped attending soccer practice, I sold my painting supplies, and we were assigned housework. I detested every aspect of my life's transformation, but since I was still reliant on my mother, there was nothing I could do about it. My paternal grandparents helped out at that point. They lived 3 states away, so we didn't see each other very often, so we had never been close, but they were always kind to me when I did see them. My grandfather was startled to learn that Mom had sold my belongings to make ends meet when he came to see us. He offered to pay for our interests and pastimes, but my mother rejected the idea, claiming she needed the money to support us rather than to finance our useless interests. She advised him to send money for power or groceries if he so desired. My grandfather became irritated and offered to cover the additional expenses if she worked to earn a living. She was in charge of making sure we survived, and he would only assist if she did her job. That's what happened when my mother said no. My mother was still receiving donations from family members and hadn't begun working at that time. Additionally, we had a lot of these handouts in some months and almost nothing in others. Our expenses were primarily covered by her parents. Because she sincerely believed that it was a man's job to provide, she flatly refused to find a job, claiming that the males in her family had a responsibility to support her. For several months, this continued, and her parents felt sorry for her and us and they took care of us. However, that money suddenly stopped being received on a regular basis. Due to Mom's extreme financial hardship, Jasmine and I had to work to supplement our income. We could be seen at a neighbor's house every weekend, weeding their garden, strolling their dog, etc. Even though it was difficult, Mom didn't start working. When her parents finally had enough, they sat her down to have a conversation. They informed her that they could no longer provide for her and us since they had made plans for how they would spend their retirement years and could no longer afford to care for us. Mom was really surprised by this since she had thought that because Dad had passed away, her father should be responsible for looking after us because men provide. Given how my grandparents had brought her up, it was difficult to dispute with such reasoning. However, they were now shifting their position. According to them, the husband's role was to support his wife, and if he passed away, the wife would have to take care of the children. My mom and her sister had been informed that all of their possessions would pass to their brother, so they were effectively cutting her off. There was a lot of crying and name-calling during the confrontation, but my grandparents refused to back down. My mother sought assistance from Auntie Janice, her sister. Now, Auntie Janice loved us and was a wonderful woman. Although they didn't spend much time with us, her husband, a surgeon, was willing to assist. However, the amount of money we received from them was insufficient to sustain a family of 3. Mom then returned to my paternal grandparents. In exchange for my mom working, my grandfather was more than happy to assist. We couldn't have survived without their assistance, so she was forced to accept. Our lives had returned to normal after she secured a well-paying housekeeping position at a neighboring hotel. We were able to return to a comfortable lifestyle with the assistance of our grandfather and uncle. For the next 2 years, until I was 14 and my sister was 16, this arrangement persisted. Our mother introduced us to Dan at that point. Her new lover, Dan, was interested in marrying her. After just one glance at him, Jasmine and I felt repulsed. I'm not kidding when I say that he smelt and looked like a pig. It seemed like he hadn't taken a bath since high school. He had a lost expression on his face and smelled like cigarettes, as though he was unable to hear anything that was said to him. Needless to say, Jasmine and I harbored a deep hatred for him in addition to our disapproval. Regretfully, Mom professed to be deeply in love with him. Jasmine and I were pledged to silence, and they were married in a hush-hush ceremony. We had to keep Mom's second marriage a secret from Dad's side of the family. She was concerned that our grandparents would discontinue the monthly payments if they learned, and because it was a sizable sum, we truly couldn't have survived without it. Jasmine and I therefore said nothing. When Mom married Dan, I'm not sure what was going through her mind, but I believe she believed that if she married and had a guy in her life, she wouldn't have to work any longer and he would take care of everything. She quit her work and returned home a week after they were married, so I'm sure she assumed that. Dan's unemployment was the issue. It was a persistent one. He was only able to work for 2 months at a time, after which he would spend his time playing video games at home and only hunt for a new job when he became tired of them. This man didn't intend to support any of us, so all of Mom's dreams came crashing down. In order to get some spending money, Jasmine and I resumed working odd jobs for people. Therefore, my mother's sister's husband or my father's parents provided the majority of the family's income. To put it mildly, it was dysfunctional, and Jasmine and I were eager to go. We concentrated on school and our part-time jobs, avoiding contact with Mom and Dan. For the following 4 years, until I departed for college and stopped talking to Mom, this was the setup. Mom and Dan were having issues by the time I was about to leave. To be honest, neither my sister nor I were surprised to learn that Dan was not just unemployed but also a chronic cheater. Things were messy, but Mom continued ignoring them or forgiving him. After I started college, I stopped talking to my mother. My mother somehow always knew what was happening in my life since I kept in touch with my grandparents, aunt and uncle. I found a respectable career after graduating from college at the age of 23. The issue was that my promotions and raises were little because I graduated just before COVID. Life kind of stopped for a while because I was unable to save as much as I had hoped. The wonderful grandpa offered me some assistance, but I declined because I didn't want to burden him. Fortunately, I didn't lose my job, so I shouldn't be too upset. I received a significant pay increase and a promotion at work a few months ago. Since I had also saved money over the COVID years by living as cheaply as possible, this put me in a good position to purchase a modest home. Despite my goal of owning a home by the age of 25, I was content with the 2-year wait. I'm not sure how, but my mother discovered that I had purchased a home. She called me and said she had not seen her baby in a long time and wanted to meet up. Since I hadn't seen her since my last semester of college, I sensed something wasn't right. After that, neither she nor I had ever volunteered to meet. I promised to get back to her and let her know when I had some spare time. I had no intention of ever getting back to her. She went on to say that I had to notify her right away since it was essential. I excused myself and hung up the phone since I knew she was asking for something. She phoned me again 2 days later and said she needed my assistance since she was in a bit of a mess. She stated she had heard I had purchased a home and wanted me to allow her and Dan to move in before I could even consent. In essence, they wanted to live with me in my home. Her arrogance made me chuckle uncontrollably. I expressed to her my surprise that Dan was still alive and my wish that she had moved on from him. I informed her that, contrary to her assumption, I did not own a house. Rather, it was an apartment with a balcony, and the 3 of us could not possibly fit there. I hoped the size and space argument would be sufficient to dissuade her because I didn't want to explicitly tell her that I didn't want her there. I had been too optimistic though. She then informed me that I could leave the flat as it was only 1 bedroom, allowing her and Dan to move in together. I informed her that was not possible because I had put in a lot of effort to have someone else reside in my home. I also needed to pay off my mortgage. She lost it when I told her that I would rent her the going rate. She began yelling at me, claiming that she hadn't brought up her daughters to be such leeches, and that she couldn't believe I was renting from my own mother. She could go somewhere else to beg for crumbs, I told her, and I didn't have time for her or her yelling. I blocked her after hanging up. Jasmine told me she hadn't received a comparable call from Mom when I contacted her. A month has passed since their last conversation, during which Mom inquired about her residence. Jasmine informed her that she and her partner had moved in together and were saving money for a home. Why Mom needed a place to stay in the first place was beyond me. Dan had moved in with us in our dad's old house, where we grew up, and she still owned it. I didn't understand why she felt the need to relocate so quickly. To inquire about the residence, I gave my paternal grandparents a call. I finally realized what was actually happening at that point. My grandfather's name was on the house where we were raised. When my grandparents died, it was technically meant to go to Dad. It was agreed that my father and his brother, our Uncle Liam, would each receive a house that belonged to my grandfather, allowing them to live there without paying rent. This was intended to provide them with a solid foundation in life and enable them to make real estate investments for their kids. Therefore, the deed to the house we grew up in was legally in my grandfather's name rather than my father's. My grandma insisted that Grandpa keep the house in his name after Dad passed away so that Jasmine and I could inherit it as adults. But Grandpa didn't want to cause Mom any more problems because she was unemployed. I believe he also felt sorry for her, which is why he gave my mother ownership of the house when she requested him to. This was done with the idea that the house would be delivered to us when Jasmine was 27 and I turned 25. I now think this is the reason Mom warned us not to bring up the fact that she had married Dan. But soon, word spread. Grandpa claims that when they learned that she had remarried, they were angry because she had concealed it from them. At that point, they sought to transfer the house's ownership as quickly as possible. They insisted on finishing the papers to ensure that Dan and Mom couldn't do anything with the house because Jasmine was an adult and I was almost one. However, Mom cleverly informed them that Dan had moved on to someone else a few weeks after they had made their plans known. Her uncontrollable tears naturally caused my grandparents to give up on pursuing the ownership issue. They eventually forgot about it, and it became less important. Since then, they had only sometimes communicated with her, and that was the last time they discussed the house with her. I informed Grandpa that Mom had called to express her desire to move in with Dan at my place. What had happened to Dad's house, if such were the case? Since he was unaware that she had reconciled with Dan or that she was relocating, he indicated he would make an effort to learn more. This makes me uneasy, and I have a hunch that more drama will soon break out. Edit. To all of the commenters, I'm shocked that I was unaware of such significant information about my mother's life. This is what happens when you don't communicate with her. I don't regret my decision to shut her out of my life. I left the house and her life as soon as I reached 18, and ever since, I've been quite formal with her. I was unaware that Dan had left her and that he would return because of this. Jasmine and I were children, which is why we were unaware of the mansion. Both our grandparents and our mother were supposed to keep us safe. For this reason, the subject of real estate or home ownership was never discussed. We were minors at the time, and Grandpa and Grandma were dealing with our mother, who was meant to look after us, not defraud us, so they never considered talking to us about it. Jasmine and I are currently unaware of what transpired with Dad's house, but we plan to ask Mom and, if necessary, plan an intervention. I'll keep you all informed. Update 1. It's not good. Jasmine, her boyfriend, my grandparents and I made the decision to meet with Mom 2 weeks after my initial post in an attempt to find out what was going on. She was taken aback when we arrived because we had not informed her of our arrival. The finest aspect. A young couple opened the door when we arrived at our house, which was Dad's house and the place we grew up in. They claimed to be the property's owners, but at first we assumed they were Dan's family or perhaps Mom's acquaintances. They were telling the truth, but I didn't trust them, so I wanted to laugh. Without telling Jasmine or me or obtaining my grandparents' approval, Mom had sold the house. It's also interesting to note that the sale took place more than 6 months ago. There is nothing we can do now because she secretly sold our house 6 months ago. Regretfully, she was the legitimate owner of the house and had the right to sell it because my grandparents never finished the paperwork and ownership transfer. Everyone is shocked by this, and we all feel deceived and repulsed. We made an effort to locate her residence. It was in a 1-bedroom apartment in a seedy part of downtown, surrounded by junkies. I wasn't shocked to see that this was Dan's apartment because he seemed to be a junkie himself. Mom went white as a ghost when she saw us all standing together. We refused to let her shut the door as she attempted to do so. Fortunately, Jasmine's boyfriend, who is 6'4" and somewhat scary, was with us. Dan was sitting on the couch, smoking a cigarette and wearing a disoriented expression as we pushed our way inside. Mom gave us a tense greeting, but we immediately attacked. I informed her that Mom had sold Dad's house without telling Jasmine, me, or our grandparents, and that I knew it was meant for us. She started crying and claimed that Dan wouldn't have returned if she hadn't done it. She basically broke down in tears as she related how Dan had abandoned her twice for 2 separate women. Grandpa had truly departed when Mom told him Dan had left during their talk about the house. For him to return, she had to beg and plead. After being evicted from his new girlfriend's home, he eventually came back. Then, a year later, Mom discovered that he was having an affair with a girl who was just barely out of her teens. I simply stared at her as if she were crazy. When he was so troublesome and not supporting her in any manner, I questioned why she hadn't left him. I didn't have the patience to feel sorry for her, and she didn't respond to that. My grandmother was enraged. She yelled at her mother, telling her that she didn't want to hear justifications for her extreme failure. The house Jasmine and I were meant to live in was all that mattered to her. According to Mom, Dan wanted to purchase a yacht, so she sold the house. I don't know much about boats, but I do know that this man decided he wanted a boat after working as a coast guard at a beach a few miles away for a few months. If Mom didn't assist him in purchasing one, he threatened to abandon her once more. Thus, my mother, the world's greatest genius, sold her home and spent a portion of the proceeds to purchase a boat for this fool. She handed him the remaining funds rather than keeping them for herself. He used every last cent of it. He had to sell the yacht and purchase the apartment they were residing in when they had nothing left. And you know what? They detested it. Mom wanted to ask if I could allow her and Dan to remain with me because of this. When her story was over, she conceded defeatingly that she was certain I would no longer allow her to remain with me. Jasmine attacked her before I could respond, and wow, she was vicious. She enumerated the ways in which Mom had failed Dad as a wife and us as a mother. In order to support her uncaring husband, she had taken away the one thing that would have allowed us to remain connected to our father. She informed Mom that she would never hear from her again and that she was dead to her. I agreed with Jasmine, but I was still in shock and couldn't say much. I didn't want to do anything with my mom. Mom broke down in tears and said that she didn't deserve to be treated this way. We informed her that she did. Most significantly, she had deprived us of a link to our father and our early years. She had also stolen from our grandparents. We had no intention of ever forgiving her. We went out. She has since attempted to contact our grandparents and us, but none of us are able to get through to her. The money and property are permanently gone, and there is nothing we can do about the house. Although I realize it's a pipe dream and not really realistic. I'm thinking about accumulating money and purchasing it if it ever goes up for sale again, since I don't want to lose that aspect of my youth. My grandparents are devastated and incensed, but they are unable to help. We keep telling Grandpa that he couldn't have known she would do this, but he still curses himself for putting his trust in her. It's just a depressing situation, and we all feel powerless. Update 2. Dan departed from Mom once more. It may sound harsh, but I adore every aspect of it. Jasmine and I have not replied to her apparent attempts to contact us using new numbers and other means. She made an effort to include Aunt Janice. Last week, she called and asked me to speak with Mom. I told her everything and told her not to get involved. She was appalled as she was unaware that we were to inherit the house. She blocked her after apologizing for attempting to support Mom. The only information I received from Mom came from Auntie Janice, who informed me that Dan had abandoned her. Mom has nowhere to go and is now homeless. At first, Auntie Janice and her husband were open to taking her home, but they firmly objected after learning what Mom had done to us. Mom sent me an email yesterday. She essentially stated that she had nowhere to go, was homeless, and was down and out. She requested permission to live with me while she sought employment. She won't seek work, and if I take her in, she won't ever leave, so I know it's a lie. I feel awful about letting her live on the streets, but I also don't want her here, which is why I haven't replied yet. There just isn't anyone who would be willing to assist her. Even though I know she is solely to blame and that she caused this, I still feel bad for her. I know she will wreck my life if I give in, so I'm hoping I don't. Update 3. Jasmine said she received something similar after I told her about Mom's email. She acknowledged that she was secretly tempted to assist her but had not replied either. Since we both know Mom's personality, Jasmine informed me she would back my choice but that I give it careful thought. She will take over and ruin any tranquility I may have if I allow her inside. Thankfully, after a lengthy conversation, Jasmine made sense to me. In the end, I answered Mom. I sent her a lengthy email informing her that I would never, ever assist her. I vented all of my feelings, including disdain, hatred, wrath, and betrayal. I don't know if she has replied because I flagged her email as spam. I sent her the contact information for a few women's shelters that might be able to assist her, but that's all I'll do. She no longer deserves our assistance because she has been financially and emotionally irresponsible throughout our lives. I have requested Auntie Janice to keep me out of her affairs because I have no idea what she will do. I don't require her life updates. She was the worst part of my childhood and is no longer my mother. I'm prepared to let her go. My stepbrother bullied me for years. I recorded him and got him expelled. Now my family wants me to say the video was fake to save his future. For the past year, my stepbrother Jonathan, 17M, has been tormenting me at school, and yesterday it just blew up. Because of how messed up this issue is, let me give you some history before I tell you what happened. 3 years ago, at her company's annual dinner, my mom met Jonathan's father, Harris, 45M. Mom had been parenting me alone since my dad died in a vehicle accident when I was 5 years old. Before she met Harris, she had a few dates but nothing committed. He seemed to genuinely care about her and was pleasant and successful. Before getting married, they dated for around a year. About 6 months into their relationship, Harris organized a dinner where I first met Jonathan. At first, Jonathan appeared to be fine, quiet but courteous. After supper, we even played video games together, and I recall thinking that maybe having a sibling wouldn't be that horrible. Being an only child has always left me feeling lonely at times, to be honest. After the wedding and when we all moved in together, everything was different. The initial weeks were uncomfortable but doable. Then, when our parents weren't present, Jonathan began to say these insignificant things. He would remark things like that I was probably in dire need of a father figure or that his dad was essentially my mom's meal ticket, which is untrue. My mom is a wealthy marketing executive. My grandma gave me a number of photo albums, and I have wonderful recollections of my dad. I initially tried to ignore it, assuming he was simply getting used to the new circumstances. However, the remarks continued to deteriorate. He would ridicule me for keeping my dad's photos in my room, telling me that I should move on since his dad was now my father. He would tell me that I was fortunate that they even allowed me to live in their house because, in reality, Harris had purchased it. They really sold both of their previous homes to buy it jointly. Mom would respond that I was being overly sensitive and that Jonathan was only attempting to get used to having a new family member when I tried to bring this up to her. Jonathan's transfer to my school at the start of this school year was the beginning of the real horror. Our parents believed that having us attend the same school would promote brotherly bonding. Jonathan plays football, has a large circle of friends, and essentially controls the social scene, making him the quintessential popular kid. I have a tiny circle of pals who share my hobbies, and I'm more interested in academics and computer programming. At school, Jonathan began spreading all these tales about me. He told people that I'm jealous of him because he has a real father, that I frantically attempt to win his dad's approval, I really avoid Harris out of respect for my dad's memories, and that I cry myself to sleep wishing for my dead dad. I don't. Because they had heard about my emotional issues, even strangers would approach me and ask if I needed an embrace. It got so awful. Physically, it began modestly. In the corridors, he would run into me and say it was an accident. With a phony voice that made his pals laugh, he would knock down my books and say sorry. However, things worsened. In the cafeteria, he once accidentally poured his energy drink all over my laptop. All of my programming efforts were stored on that laptop, and although I was able to preserve the hard drive, the laptop itself was destroyed. Jonathan said it was just an accident and offered to let me use his old laptop when I told Mom and Harris. They told me I was exaggerating the situation because they thought he was right. Even Mom's sister, Aunt Sarah, who was formerly quite close to me and always supported me, began to advise me to make a greater effort to connect with Jonathan. He's just being a typical teenage boy, and you're too sensitive, just like your father was, she would add. My dad was always my hero, so having her point the finger at me in that final remark was incredibly hurtful. Things dramatically worsened around a month ago. After gym class, Jonathan and his pals cornered me in the boys' locker room. They were pushing me around, removing my glasses, and making fun of the fact that I couldn't even fight back like a real man, all without actually striking me. I decided I had had enough at that point. When Jonathan was around, I began surreptitiously recording everything on my phone. I was desperate, even though I realized it might not be the correct thing to do. When I told them what was going on, they didn't believe me. I got just what I needed 2 weeks ago. Tommy, a freshman, was being harassed by Jonathan and his pals. Tommy is quite bashful and little for his age. He was trying to jump and catch his bag as they threw it over his head in a game of keep away. They referred to him by derogatory terms, saying things like, "What's wrong, short stack? Unable to get there?" I took notes on everything. Jonathan went too far though. Jonathan became enraged and gave Tommy a strong shove when he eventually succeeded in grabbing his luggage. Tommy's nose got bloody after he collapsed and struck his face against a locker. I went directly to the principal with the video. Despite their generally lax enforcement of our school's zero-tolerance policy for bullying, they were unable to ignore it when there was video proof of actual physical attack. By the end of the day, Jonathan was formally discharged from school when they phoned Harris to come get him. Everything blew up when we got home that afternoon. Jonathan sobbed to his father about how his life had been ruined, how he would never be able to attend a reputable university, and how this would ruin his chances of receiving a football scholarship. Harris was enraged with me, shouting that I had betrayed family, and that I was only envious of Jonathan's accomplishments. The worst part, though? My mother sided with them. In fact, she advised me to visit them first rather than the principal first. She claimed that by going behind their backs, I had betrayed my family and that in order to get Jonathan back into school, I had to admit to the principal that I had altered the tape or something. Mom began to cry when I refused and tried to tell them about all the bullying I had experienced, claiming that I was ending her marriage and that I should put family first. Then, 4 months before I turned 18, Harris threatened to throw me out. I contacted my grandma, Dad's mother, because I could take it no more. I've been staying with her ever since she came to get me that evening. My mother is constantly texting and calling, switching between threatening to ruin my future and guilt-tripping me over destroying our family. While some of my students are accusing me of being a snitch, others who have also been harassed by Jonathan are expressing gratitude to me. I know what I did was right, Therefore I don't regret anything, but now everything is in such disarray. The worst thing is that my mother, who has always encouraged me to confront bullies, is now telling me that I should have remained silent. Update 1. I want to start by expressing my gratitude to everyone who left a remark on my previous post. All of the encouragement has been so overwhelming that I needed some time to take it all in before updating. A lot has transpired during the last 2 weeks, and they have been intense. My mom unexpectedly showed up at my grandmother's place the day after I posted. Despite her displeasure, my grandmother allowed her entry. Mom appeared awful, as if she hadn't had any sleep in days. When she first saw me, she broke down in tears and said she wanted to make amends because she had failed me as a mother. I felt sorry for her for a second. She then mentioned Jonathan. She said that although she could understand why I did what I did, I had to realize that Jonathan's entire future was on the line. It seems that 3 other schools in our district attempted to enroll him after he was dismissed from our school, but all of them turned him away due to the bullying event. I only showed the principal the video, but it somehow got out there, and suddenly Jonathan was being called a violent bully. Jonathan was reportedly despondent, seldom eating, and always talking about how his life was over, according to Mom. She informed me that he might now be turned down by colleges after losing his shot at a football scholarship. She repeatedly reached for my hand during our conversation, but I resisted. She was still attempting to make me feel bad about defending myself, and I couldn't believe it. After sitting silently in her armchair through all of this, my grandma eventually said something. She revealed to me something I was unaware of. My dad had experienced terrible bullying during his high school years. He seemed to be quite similar to me at my age, quiet, interested in school, and a simple target for bullies. When the bullies pushed him down a flight of stairs one day, it got so terrible that he ended up in the hospital with a fractured arm. He was altered by that experience. After that, according to my grandma, he was resolved to never allow bullies to get away with harming people. He always taught me to advocate for others and myself because of this. She claimed that he would have been pleased with the actions I took to safeguard Tommy, the freshman, as well as myself. My mother dropped the true bombshell as I was still processing this new information about my dad. She sobbed as she disclosed that Harris had threatened to file for divorce if she didn't accept responsibility for the video's editing and write a statement claiming that I had fabricated everything to get Jonathan back into school. She pleaded with me to help her keep her marriage together, stating that she couldn't endure another broken relationship. My own mother was pleading with me to lie and accept responsibility for everything in order to keep her husband from abandoning her, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My grandmother must have noticed my surprise because she told my mom to go right away. She claimed that a mother didn't deserve to be called a mother at all if she asked her child to take responsibility for their own mistreatment. My grandma handed me a collection of letters my dad had written to me before he passed away after Mom left. She believed I needed them immediately, even though they were meant to be presented to me when I turned 18. He expressed his desire for me to always stand up for what's right, even when everyone else was against me, in one of them, which was written just 1 week prior to his accident. He wrote that being brave is about doing the right thing in the face of fear, not about never being afraid. In the meantime, education has become more difficult. Through the use of photoshopped images of me with derogatory captions and the dissemination of false information that I'm mentally ill and made things up for attention, Jonathan's friends have been harassing me online. However, an unforeseen event occurred. The freshman Jonathan had harassed, Tommy, shared his own experience. Tommy informed the principal of further instances in which he had been harassed by Jonathan. Then other children began to come forward, like dominoes falling. Some even have recordings of themselves. One female had recorded being harassed about her weight by Jonathan and his friends for weeks. Screenshots of Jonathan harassing him and threatening to tell everyone were in the possession of another man. Yesterday, I was called into the school counselor's office. A big folder containing complaints about Jonathan from the previous year that had been misplaced or disregarded was presented to me by her. She asked whether I would be willing to assist in establishing an anti-bullying committee at the school and expressed regret for not acting sooner. She claimed that by confronting Jonathan, I had inspired other kids to speak up as well. I'm a cunning kid who set Jonathan up because I was envious of him, Harris has been telling everyone who will listen. He is being believed by a number of family members, including my Aunt Sarah. She gave me a lengthy lecture over the phone yesterday, expressing her disappointment that I had ruined a young man's future over teenage drama. I should have handled it within the family instead of embarrassing everyone by going to the principal, she remarked, echoing Mom's statement. I continue to reside at my grandmother's home. Since I'll be 18 in 4 months anyhow, she's actually assisting me with researching legal emancipation. I have a strong case, especially considering the circumstances, according to the attorney we spoke with. I constantly get these lengthy, tearful letters from my mom saying that I'm tearing the family apart, and that I'll regret it when I'm older. I no longer reply to them. It's unbelievable to me that she would put her marriage before her own son. I'm attempting to concentrate on my studies and maintain my marks at the moment. Despite everything, my grandmother has been incredible. She even made me a little study space in her guest room, just as I had at home. Reading my dad's letters is helpful on days that are more difficult than others. It is as though he anticipated my need for his counsel years later. I'm just trying to get through each day right now, but I'll update again if something important occurs. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support. Knowing that I'm not alone in advocating for myself is a huge comfort. Update 2. Things have taken a surprising turn, and I'm still figuring out what happened. Karen, Jonathan's birth mother, sent me a Facebook message last week, which surprised me. She claimed that one of Harris's relatives had told her about what had occurred and that she wanted to meet with him to discuss it. I was somewhat apprehensive at first. I was unsure of her motivation because Harris had consistently portrayed her as an unstable individual who had deserted Jonathan. However, my grandma consented to accompany me, so last Saturday we met Karen at a coffee shop close to her home. Everything I believed to be true about the scenario was totally altered by what she told us. It turns out that Jonathan had previously engaged in severe bullying. Prior to my mom and Harris's marriage, he had received 3 suspensions from his former school for harassing other pupils. The most recent instance was very awful. As a prank, he and his friends had trapped a child in the gym storage room for several hours. Following that episode, Karen had attempted to get Jonathan into therapy. In order to address Jonathan's violent conduct, she showed us past emails she had exchanged with Jonathan's school counselor, who strongly suggested a psychological assessment and treatment. Harris, however, had objected, claiming that Karen was attempting to portray their kid as weak and damaged. When she gave us the records from their custody dispute, it was the true stunner. Harris had obtained full custody because he had superior counsel and persuaded the court that Karen was trying to create problems where there weren't any by insisting on therapy, not because he was the better parent. Not only did he transfer Jonathan to my school because of the marriage, but his previous school had threatened to expel him if he committed another infraction. As she was telling us all of this, Karen started crying. She claimed that although she had made an effort to remain involved in Jonathan's life, Harris had threatened to take legal action against her if she attempted to get in touch with his school or intervene. She kept apologizing to me for not speaking up sooner, claiming that she was too scared of Harris to take any action. Harris had done this previously, which explains a lot of why he was so fast to threaten divorce if I didn't accept responsibility. Instead of genuinely assisting Jonathan in resolving his problems, he is more concerned with maintaining his reputation. He has been repeating this cycle for years. Last night, I presented my mother with all of this material. Karen had provided us with copies of everything, including the court records, emails, and school reports, but I wasn't sure if she would believe it. I saw genuine understanding appear on Mom's face for the first time since this whole thing began when she read it all. At last, she broke down and acknowledged that she had been seeing Jonathan's conduct even prior to the school event, but she had been too scared of losing Harris to recognize it. She told me how some parents had stopped allowing their children to attend study groups at our house, how she had heard Jonathan being mean to other children when he believed no adults were around, and how she had noticed my withdrawal and anxiety but had told herself it was just teenage stuff. Mom moved out of Harris's house today. Yes, the same Aunt Sarah who chastised me is the one she's staying with. After seeing the proof, she has entirely altered her mind. Mom says she can't stay with someone who would protect a bully at the expense of other children, even if that child is his, and she has already filed for divorce, but not because of Harris's ultimatum. In order to get the custody agreement examined, Karen is collaborating with her attorneys. She has already discussed Jonathan's background and needs with counselors at a school in her state and wants to get him into the therapy he ought to have received years ago. Harris is enraged that all of this has come to light. The most unexpected aspect? Our principal has been contacted by Jonathan's former school. It appears that they are looking into the handling of Jonathan's bullying accusations and the reasons behind the loss or disregard of reports of his actions. Although it hasn't been confirmed yet, there are hints that Harris may have been involved. All of this is still registering in my mind. It's somewhat comforting to know that I wasn't insane and that Jonathan had a lengthy past that I was unaware of. However, it's disheartening to consider that perhaps none of this would have occurred if Jonathan had received assistance years prior, when Karen first became aware of the issues. My mother is always complaining that she should have done a better job of protecting me. Even if there is still too much hurt between us, at least she now realizes how horrible what she wanted me to do was. In order to understand why she was so willing to overlook the warning flags, she is discussing seeking therapy for herself. I'll give you another update if anything significant occurs, but for now, I'm just trying to concentrate on having a successful end to the school year. According to my grandma, I should be proud of myself for not only confronting Jonathan but also for being the one to end the years-long cycle of silence that had been shielding him. Update 3. 3 months have passed since my previous report, and things have finally begun to return to normal. I thought I should give you all a final update because a lot has changed. About a month ago, once my mom acquired her own house, I moved back in with her. Despite being smaller than our previous home, the flat nevertheless feels more like home. She continues to apologize nearly daily, and even though I've forgiven her, our relationship has changed. We both seem cautious now, as if we're worried about saying the wrong thing. Surprisingly, I chose to start family counseling 2 weeks ago. The counselor is assisting us in improving our communication and re-establishing mutual trust. There were some unsettling findings from the examination at Jonathan's previous school. It appears that Harris had been contributing regularly to the school's athletic department, which could account for the disappearance of numerous complaints regarding Jonathan. A thorough investigation is underway by the school board, and a number of administrators have been placed on leave. Last month, Jonathan relocated to his mother's state and is now enrolled in a new school that focuses on behaviorally challenged adolescents. I've heard that he's doing better now that Karen has him in rigorous therapy. He apologized for everything in a lengthy Facebook message that I received. He wrote about how therapy is helping him deal with his anger management difficulties and how he's finally realizing why he acted the way he did. I haven't replied yet. Perhaps I will, but right now I'm not prepared. The school's anti-bullying committee has flourished. The school administration is now taking bullying concerns much more seriously after we assisted a number of students in coming forward with their stories. Actually, I sit on the committee with Tommy, the freshman whom Jonathan harassed. He has grown to be the kind of brother I had thought Jonathan would be, like a little brother to me. The remaining letters from my dad were given to me by my grandma, and reading them has been both devastating and therapeutic. In one of them, he expresses his desire that I will become a person who defends others, and it seems as though he is still mentoring me despite the passage of time. Last week, my mom's divorce was finalized. Harris attempted to argue against it, but he immediately changed his mind once mom's attorney presented the information regarding Jonathan's history and Harris's role in concealing it. Mom is also receiving therapy to help her understand why she was so ready to overlook Jonathan's bullying warning signs. She claims that she lost sight of what was truly important, being a good mother, because she was so terrified of being alone once more when Dad passed away. The most surprising thing happened last week. I received a letter from Karen. She expressed her gratitude to me for being the first to reveal Jonathan's situation. She claimed that after years of feeling bad about not being able to support her son, she has found peace in witnessing him finally receive the assistance he requires. As a thank you, she also wrote me a check for my education fund, which I was able to return with the assistance of my grandma. Accepting it didn't seem right. Next month, I will graduate and move to another state for college. My dad left some money for my schooling, and my grandmother is assisting me with the money now that I've been accepted into a reputable computer science program. To have a new beginning ahead of me feels nice. Although fewer people now believe Harris, he continually disparages me to everyone who will listen. I've received apologies from some family members who initially supported him, such as Aunt Sarah, who now gives me cookies every weekend and never stops telling me how proud my dad would be. I've learned a lot about sticking up for what's right, even when it's difficult, from this entire process. I've discovered that you should continue to protect yourself even if the individuals who are supposed to do so fail you. I'm grateful for everyone who supported me, especially my grandma, who taught me what true family support looks like. I'm no longer furious. My sister invited my abusive ex to my wedding to sabotage it. I exposed her infidelity to her boyfriend, and she lost everything. Hello Reddit. I, 32F, never imagined that I would be blogging here, but I feel the need to vent after everything that has transpired. I know the title sounds harsh, but bear with me. It will take a while to read this. I've always considered my family to be very typical. I'm the eldest of 2 sisters. Although they weren't severe, our parents instilled strong values in us and worked hard to provide us with a wonderful existence. When we were younger, my sister Catherine, 28F, and I were close, but during her adolescence, things began to change. She started to seek attention more and somehow kept getting into problems. Her problems, failing classes, sneaking out, and lying about where she was going, took up a lot of my parents' time. I, on the other hand, was consistent in my grades, complied with regulations, and never caused trouble. The tendency persisted after college. While Catherine changed employment frequently, never remaining for more than 8 or 9 months at one place, I was able to secure a steady work. She would get dismissed for a variety of reasons or quit because the atmosphere was toxic. Our parents continued to support her financially by paying her vehicle payments and rent when she was unable to. I also made an effort to assist by setting up 2 interviews for her at my company, but she was late for the first one and failed to show up for the second. 3 years ago, during my friend Lisa's 30th birthday celebration, I met my husband, Tyler. He worked with Lisa, and as soon as we spoke, everything made sense. He's thoughtful, steady, funny, and pretty much everything I've been searching for. I first became aware of Catherine's strange conduct during our year-long courtship before we moved in together. She would always arrive at our house without warning when she knew Tyler would be home. She wouldn't be able to visit if Tyler was working late. She began asking me strange questions about our relationship, such as if we had ever argued, whether I believed he was truly dedicated, and whether I was concerned about the 2-year age difference. I initially believed that she was merely protecting me or perhaps feeling envious that I was seeing her less. Since Brett, my ex, is significant to this narrative, I should bring him up here. In my mid-20s, Brett and I dated for 2 years. After a wonderful beginning, he gradually started to exert control over the relationship. He would arrive at work without warning, check my phone while I was asleep, and become upset if I went out with friends without him. He kept me apart from everyone but my family. And dispute about my messaging a male coworker about work was the last straw. He shoved me up against a wall and said that if I ever disrespected him again, it would get worse. That evening, I went to live with my parents and obtained a restraining order. Catherine even assisted me in moving my belongings out of his house, so the entire family is aware of what transpired. Tyler popped the question on a beach vacation last year. I was ecstatic, and it was ideal. I was too thrilled to notice Catherine's strange silence when we made the announcement at family supper. When I brought up wedding preparations, she became excited and virtually pleaded for my assistance. I was apprehensive because of her history of not completing tasks, but she appeared very excited and assured me that she would take it seriously. I persuaded Tyler to give her a try despite his skepticism. A huge error. The issues began modestly. Despite forgetting to relay vendor messages and scheduling conflicts, she always had an excuse and would make the necessary corrections just in time to appear as though she had saved the day. Then more serious problems began to arise. Although I had sent the money to Catherine weeks prior, the venue asserted that they never got our payment. Although Catherine insisted she had handled it, the florist canceled since final selections were never confirmed. We required food for 150 guests, but the caterer only had enough for 50. Every time something went wrong, Catherine would seem heartbroken and somehow repair it at the last minute, making herself appear heroic while I became angry with myself for having any doubts about her. I stood up for Catherine even though Tyler proposed that we handle the planning ourselves. She was my sister, and I believed she was genuinely attempting to assist. I saw her browsing Tyler's phone at our parents' place 2 weeks prior to the wedding. Tyler had left his phone charging in the kitchen while he was assisting Dad with something in the garage, and she had offered to help set up for Sunday dinner. She abruptly put down the phone when I entered, saying she was only attempting to show Mom some wedding pictures I had sent Tyler. It felt strange, but I ignored it because I had so many other wedding-related issues to handle. The wedding day got off to a fairly typical start. Everything appeared to be in order. All of the vendors arrived on time, the location looked stunning, and the flowers were just what I had requested. My bridesmaids and I were in the bridal room when I heard something outside. I glanced out before anyone could stop me and saw Brett and the security guys fighting. My heart stopped beating. I was making a big mistake, he was screaming, and he needed to talk to me. He was taken out by security, but I was shaken. How was the wedding even known to him? Since the restraining order ended 3 years ago, I hadn't spoken to him. My best friend Sarah, who has never been fond of Catherine, showed me something on her phone at that point. She was able to access her unlocked phone while Catherine was in the restroom after spotting her acting suspiciously. Brett and Catherine exchanged messages for weeks. She had informed him that I wasn't content with Tyler, emailed him all the wedding information, and persuaded him that I still harbored affections for him. She couldn't stand seeing me settle for the wrong man, so she vowed to help him win me back. However, things worsened. Sarah discovered correspondence between Catherine and Ryan, her boyfriend, in which Catherine expressed her affections for Tyler. She admitted that she had initially spotted him at Lisa's party but thought I had stolen him. In order to fully express her feelings to Tyler, she was attempting to call off the wedding. She even griped to Ryan about how unfair it was that while she was stuck with him, her plain older sister had landed such a great guy. Despite my devastation, I vowed not to let them spoil my day. Although it did not go as neatly as anticipated, the wedding did take place. Playing the role of the worried sister, Catherine pretended to be utterly surprised by Brett's appearance. When my parents learned what she had done, they were incensed, but we made the decision to handle it after the honeymoon. I showed Ryan everything when we returned, including Catherine's communications with Brett and her admissions regarding Tyler. Despite his pain, Ryan thanked me. At that point, he informed me of Catherine's questionable actions with her coworker, Mike. She and he had apparently been spending a lot of time together at work, going to lunch every day and messaging constantly. She consistently brushed off Ryan's worries, claiming that Ryan was being overly neurotic and that Mike was merely a buddy. That's what inspired me to seek retribution. Even though I may have gone too far, I don't regret it given what she did to me. Knowing that Catherine would be having her daily lunch meeting with Mike, I assisted Ryan in organizing a surprise visit to her place of employment. As they say, the rest is history. Update 1. Since I last posted, a lot has transpired. Yesterday's workplace altercation, which I assisted in organizing, was far more chaotic than I had anticipated. Ryan told me everything even though I wasn't there, and tidbits have also been coming in from other sources. Ryan did this by taking a day off from his own employment. For a week, he had been keeping tabs on Catherine's lunch habits. She consistently ate her meal with Mike, in his office with the door closed, and for precisely 75 minutes rather than the usual hour. Other staff members Ryan talked to said that this had been occurring for months. At precisely 12:45 p.m., when Catherine would undoubtedly be in Mike's office, he planned his visit. Ryan informed me that he nearly canceled at the last minute. He debated whether he truly wanted to know the truth for 15 minutes while he stood in the parking lot. He got the boost he needed though, when he recalled all the texts about Tyler and how Catherine believed she was settling for Ryan. Ryan was in without question after the office receptionist recognized him from company events. He headed to the third-floor office where Mike worked. He could see them sitting on Mike's desk chair together, heads hunched over Mike's phone, giggling about something, through the glass divider. Mike had Catherine virtually on his lap. Ryan claimed that they appeared to be a long-term couple who were totally at ease with one another. After a single knock, Ryan entered. He said that Catherine knocked over a cup of coffee when she leaped away from Mike. In a matter of seconds, her expression changed from shock to terror to rage. Given that Catherine had never brought up having a boyfriend, Mike simply appeared perplexed. She said that she couldn't wear rings while typing, which is why she had been wearing her promise ring from Ryan. Yes, they had exchanged promise rings 6 months prior, on a chain around her neck at work. Ryan gently made his way to Mike's desk rather than shouting or making a disturbance, as Catherine most likely anticipated. Printouts of Catherine's messages, including those about Tyler and her discussions with Brett about spoiling my wedding, were in a folder he put there. "She's all yours, yours," he murmured, turning to go after giving Mike a quick glance. Catherine began to panic at that point. She made a scene in the center of the office as she chased after Ryan and grabbed his arm. In tears, she said that she could explain everything and that it wasn't what it appeared to be. By now, a number of colleagues had emerged from their desks to observe the action. According to Ryan, other people were using their phones to record it. Those movies must be doing the rounds in the office right now. The higher authorities took notice of their argument. The department head and Catherine's immediate supervisor arrived to look into the disturbance. At this point, things truly took a turn for the worse. Catherine began disclosing inappropriate information in her haste to defend herself. She mentioned contacting Brett regarding my wedding during business hours. She mentioned using her business phone to make long-distance calls to him. She even acknowledged that she had printed wedding-related documents on the office printer. It seems that she had been printing wedding invitations for people using workplace resources as a type of side gig. With every admittance, the department head's expression seemed to harden. He called Ed right away to retrieve her phone logs and print them out. They learned at that point that she had been making private international calls to a person in Europe, which was likely another secret she was maintaining. However, Ryan, who had had enough of being deceived, dropped the true bombshell. He told me something that made me feel sick. Catherine had arrived at the bar by coincidence the night before my wedding, at Tyler's bachelor party. One of Tyler's groomsmen, Ryan, was present. Catherine cornered Tyler outside the restroom and attempted to kiss him after the majority of others had gone. Catherine pleaded with Ryan not to tell me, but Tyler pushed her away right away and walked away. She sobbed, claimed to be intoxicated and disoriented, and vowed that it would never occur again. By threatening to destroy my wedding day if I found out, she coerced Ryan into remaining silent. I contacted Tyler as soon as Ryan told me about this section today. He stated he didn't inform me because he didn't want to start a commotion just before the wedding, but he did confirm everything. After we returned from the honeymoon, he intended to inform me. Tyler was attempting to keep me happy on my wedding day, therefore I'm not upset with him. However, I'm upset with Catherine for placing him in that situation. The consequences have been enormous. Catherine's supervisors are thoroughly auditing her computer usage and spending. Mike reportedly went to HR to defend himself, saying that despite his request to maintain professionalism, Catherine had been making inappropriate advances. Ryan's observations are totally at odds with this, but I suppose Mike is attempting to protect himself. Last night, Ryan left their shared flat. Until he can locate a new place, he is staying with friends. Everyone's phones have been blown up by Catherine, including Tyler's, Ryan's, our parents, and Trent's and mine. She alternates between acting like the victim and claiming that we all plotted to destroy her life. Our parents disagree about how to respond to this. Mom says I should have handled it privately as a family concern and believes I went too far by bringing up Catherine's place of employment. But Dad is really on my side. He asserts that rather than receiving another bailout, Catherine should finally experience the repercussions of her actions. I have no regrets about what I did. Perhaps I went too far, but she deserves everything that comes her way because of what she did to my wedding, attempted to do to my marriage, and has been doing to Ryan. This is only the beginning, according to what Ryan is telling me. The company audit will uncover much more than improper phone calls and mishandled office supplies. When I have more information, I'll update. Update 2. If it was conceivable, things with Catherine have become worse. When the audit results were released, they were much more detrimental than anyone had anticipated. The finding of systematic fraud resulted from an investigation into the misuse of business resources for wedding sabotage. Catherine had been submitting fictitious expense reports for non-existent customer appointments for the last 8 months. She made complex spreadsheets with fictitious phone numbers and email addresses that detailed encounters with possible clients. She even falsified the signatures on paperwork confirming the encounter. She falsely claimed more than $15,000 in reimbursements in total. The really heinous thing, though, is that she had set up a paper trail that implicated Jenny, her assistant. She had been gradually assembling evidence to blame Jenny for everything in the event that she was apprehended. There were documents stored on Jenny's drive, a phony confession letter saved as a draft, and suspicious emails written but not sent from Jenny's computer, which Catherine had access to because Jenny trusted her. All of this was discovered by the company's IT team while conducting their inquiry. The employer is filing charges against her in addition to terminating her. Catherine had designated me as her emergency contact rather than our parents, so yesterday the HR director gave me a call. He wanted to alert me to the fact that they would be filing a lawsuit. Their legal team is getting the documentation ready, and they have already called the police. The coworker she was becoming close to, Mike, has totally put her under the bus. He brought a thorough statement to HR alleging that Catherine had been pestering him sexually for months. He said that despite his repeated attempts to maintain professional boundaries, she had surrounded him in the break room, sent improper texts after work hours, and made unwanted physical contact. He even showed images of him requesting that she refrain from sending him late-night texts. I was shown a few of Catherine's most recent mails by Ryan. She has been sending him a ton of emails and texts, alternating between pleading with him to return and pointing the finger at everyone else for her troubles. In fact, she claimed, if my sister hadn't taken Tyler away from me, none of this would have occurred. She was aware that I was interested in him and that I had seen him first at that gathering, but she wanted to have him for herself since she has always been envious of me. These texts include terrifying delusions. She stated that Tyler was clearly settling for second best with me, that they made meaningful eye contact at family dinners, and that he would particularly chuckle at her jokes. Even though Tyler hardly recalls speaking to her during family get-togethers, she seems to sincerely think that they had a relationship. However, my mother made the most startling discovery yesterday. She contacted me in tears and said she had something to tell me that she ought to have told me years ago. Catherine had apparently engaged in a similar activity during her high school years. She sought to quit their relationship after becoming fixated with her best friend Rachel's boyfriend. She wrote fictitious love letters from the boyfriend to herself, circulated false accusations that Rachel was cheating, and finally attempted to kiss him at a party. She told everyone that he had attempted to attack her after he turned her down. When the truth was finally revealed, Mom sent her to counseling, but it was obvious that this didn't make much of a difference. Mom holds herself responsible for not informing me of this situation sooner. She kept it private to preserve Catherine's reputation since she believed that the conduct had stopped after therapy and that it was only a passing phase. She now understands that she ought to have forewarned me when Catherine began displaying excessive interest in Tyler. Ryan is now staying with friends after moving all of his possessions out of their apartment. He met a female at his gym, and he has already begun dating her. Catherine had a total breakdown after learning about it from mutual acquaintances. They threatened to call the police after she arrived at his gym crying and making a disturbance. She even attempted to persuade our father to speak with Ryan, but he turned her down, telling her that, for the first time in her life, she would have to deal with the fallout from her actions. She had another tantrum as a result, accusing our parents of constantly favoring me and forcing her to compete for everything. I'm done with Catherine, even though I'm not sure what will happen with the legal accusations. It was all an act, the sister I believed I had never existed. I can't help but notice her true identity now that the mask has come off. Update 3, a month has passed since my previous post, and things have finally calmed down, though not in the manner Catherine likely had in mind. The business proceeded with pressing charges. She faces official charges of embezzlement and fraud. Her attorney suggested that she accept a plea agreement, which would probably spare her from going to jail but would require her to serve probation and pay full reparations. She suffered financially as a result of losing her work. Due to the charges appearing in background checks, she is unable to get a new job. Due to her 2-month rent arrears, her landlord slapped her with an eviction notice last week. When prospective employers contacted her former company for references, she attempted to conceal her current residence by applying for jobs using our parents' address. Ryan has moved on entirely. He is formally dating Sarah, a girl from his gym, and they appear to be happy together. She is nice and totally different from Catherine, who I met last week. She leads a pretty drama-free life and holds steady work as a kindergarten teacher. There is no greater glaring contrast with Catherine. When Jenny, Catherine's old assistant, contacted me on LinkedIn, it was a true surprise. She wanted to express her gratitude to me for unintentionally revealing Catherine's plots. Evidently, Catherine had been claiming credit for her work and quietly threatening her job security for months, making her workplace a living hell. The corporation is funding Jenny's further certifications, and she has been elevated to Catherine's previous role. After Catherine attempted to place the responsibility for everything on my parents, they are now all disappointed in her. When she arrived at their home last week, she yelled that they had destroyed her life by constantly comparing her to me and made her feel inferior. She claimed Dad was controlling because he wouldn't give her the money to hire a lawyer, and she accused Mom of partiality since Mom assisted me more with wedding planning after Catherine ruined everything. She unexpectedly arrived at our house last night. She was crying because she needed aid and was about to be evicted. I remained in the kitchen while Tyler opened the door. He blocked her path when she attempted to push past him to reach me. She began yelling that he was stuck in a loveless marriage with me, that she had always loved him more than I could, and that they were meant to be together. Normally extremely calm and courteous, Tyler informed her she needed professional treatment and threatened to get a restraining order if she returned to our home. She cried out that we would regret it and that we would pay a price for ruining her life. I just replied, "Catherine, you ruined your own life." As I made my way to the door, "We simply revealed your actions." While she was in the middle of her tirade, I shut the door. I've blocked her on social media, email, and the phone. Our parents understood when I informed them I was done with her. Although they aren't totally cutting her off, they have made it clear that they will no longer give her money or allow her to control them. We have to move to a different state since Tyler received a promotion at work. To be honest, the timing of our move next month couldn't be more ideal. We need a new beginning away from all of this drama. Catherine won't know about the move until we're already gone, so we haven't told her and don't intend to. I've discovered that toxic is toxic, regardless of blood relationship, despite the saying that blood is thicker than water. I've come to terms with the fact that my sister never existed and grieved for her. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me along the way. I'm excited to begin our new life without any drama. Dad chose my stepbrother's wedding over mine. So my grandpa walked me down the aisle and I inherited his lake house. I 28F am in dire need of guidance regarding my wedding circumstances. Family drama has made what could have been a great situation into a total nightmare. I'll start from the beginning to help you understand how we got here because there's a lot to unpack. I grew up in what I believe to be a happy family as an only child. Weekend excursions with my parents, family game evenings, and my dad teaching me how to ride a bike are all part of my early recollections. The type of father who would construct tree houses for me and ward off monsters beneath my bed, he was my hero. But when I was 14, everything changed. The day my parents sat me down and announced their impending divorce is still fresh in my mind. Mom had discovered that Dad was having an affair with his coworker, Laura, 42F. Dad and Laura were married 6 months after the divorce was finalized. At that point, I got to know Aaron, 25M, Laura's son from a prior marriage. The change wasn't simple. Suddenly, I had a stepbrother after being an only child. My dad took it upon himself to be Aaron's ideal father figure when his biological father abandoned him when he was a little child. I initially found it admirable that Dad was assisting a child in need of a father. I was unaware that this would ultimately result in the death of my own father. Although slow, the alterations persisted. Aaron's baseball schedule became the focal point of our Sunday father-daughter breakfasts, which evolved into family breakfasts. My dad used to attend all of my dance recitals, but he started missing them because Aaron had practices or games. Despite having no baseball knowledge, he even joined Aaron's squad as assistant coach. My mother remarried David, a good man who had a job offer in another state, when I was 16. Despite everything, I wanted to be near my dad, so I chose to stay when they asked if I wanted to relocate with them. In retrospect, I wish I had chosen differently. My final year of college was the true turning moment. One rainy night, I was hit by another automobile that ran a red light while I was traveling home. Due to intestinal bleeding, I need emergency surgery. David and Mom flew in right away, but my dad? He texted me to let me know that Aaron was having a breakdown over his girlfriend ending their relationship, so he couldn't go. I was in the hospital for 3 days and he never once came up. I concentrated on creating my own life after graduation. At work, I met Mike, 30M, the new IT manager, and we became friends because we both enjoy hiking and classic sci-fi films. He proposed to us on a sunrise hike to our favorite location after 3 years of dating. It was ideal, and I felt as though my life was finally coming together for the first time. We sent out invitations 6 months in advance and decided to get married on October 15th of this year. I debated whether or not to ask Dad to escort me down the aisle for weeks. He was still my father in spite of everything, and I secretly hoped that this would be our opportunity to mend our relationship. A month prior to the wedding, I made the decision to hold off and surprise him with the request. However, Dad called me to lunch before I could ask him. He avoided making eye contact and appeared anxious. At last, he revealed the shocking news. Dad had already agreed to be Aaron's best man, and Aaron was getting married on October 15th. I had the impression that I had been punched in the stomach. I asked Aaron why he picked the same day, and he told me it was the day he and his fiancée initially met 2 years prior. I mentioned that Aaron was aware of our date and that we had sent out our invitations months prior. Dad's reaction? Since my venue was more flexible while Aaron's was extremely exclusive, he recommended that I change my date. I wouldn't alter our date. Deposits had already been made, invitations had been sent, and relatives were traveling in from abroad. Dad accused me of being self-centered and disregarding Aaron's sentiments when I attempted to explain this. He claimed that because Aaron never had a real father figure, he needed him more. When my grandfather, Mom's father, learned, the situation blew out. He and I have always been close, particularly since my parents' divorce. He offered to take me down the aisle right away since he was upset with my dad. Then Dad made an unexpected announcement. He said he would give his vacation home to Mike and me as a wedding present. It is a stunning waterfront property that we have always appreciated. Dad abruptly changed his mind. He contacted me and said he could make both weddings work, showing up at my reception to dance with me after serving as Aaron's best man at the ceremony. He began accusing me of destroying the family and forcing him to make a decision when I didn't agree right away. Karma, however, had other ideas. It seems that Aaron did not ask Dad to his wedding 2 weeks prior. Aaron wanted his biological father to be his best man instead, according to Dad, who called me in tears. Assuming he could just lead me down the aisle as if nothing had happened, Dad was now free to take part in every aspect of my wedding. No, I told him. Given his extraordinary generosity, I didn't want to upset my grandfather by denying him this moment because he had stepped up when Dad stepped out. Dad went totally crazy. He began shouting that I was being deceived by my grandfather, that I was selling my loyalty for a house, and that I was putting money before family. I blocked his number after hanging up on him. His whole family is now accusing me of being materialistic and callous. Dad is hurting, therefore my stepmother Laura says I should be more compassionate. Since he's now available, even some of my friends believe I'm being too harsh and that I should give him another try. However, I don't believe I'm mistaken. This goes beyond the wedding. It's about years of being viewed as Aaron's second best friend and having my needs and feelings ignored in favor of Aaron. Since he's only coming to me since his first choice didn't work out, why should I give him this unique moment? So, Reddit, even if my dad is now available, am I wrong for not letting him lead me down the aisle? By picking my grandfather, who gave us a house, over my father, am I being materialistic? I'd greatly benefit from an independent viewpoint on this. Update 1. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for their encouraging words and remarks. I feel more sure now about my choice thanks to all of you. However, since my previous post, a lot has transpired, and I must tell you about the mayhem that occurred during my wedding rehearsal. Yesterday, the rehearsal was set to begin at our location at 5:00 p.m. It was going well. The ladies were practicing their steps, Mike's nephew was performing admirably as our ring bearer, and my granddad was rehearsing leading me down the aisle. Then my father unexpectedly arrived. We didn't notice him at first. He crept into the rear of the venue and observed from the sidelines. He didn't start yelling until we were in the middle of the second practice. Yelling that this was all wrong and that he was my real father, who had a greater right to be there than my grandfather, he rushed down the aisle and shoved past my bridesmaids. Bless him, my grandfather made an effort to remain composed. Protectively, he moved in front of me and beckoned Dad away. Dad became even more irate as a result. He began bringing up old family history, saying that my grandfather had never liked him and that the house offer had turned me against him. He even claimed that my grandfather was attempting to purchase his way into the position of father of the bride. The worst thing? Dad could not stand up straight and his sentences were slurred, so it was obvious he had been drinking. Before venue security arrived, Dad attempted to physically shove my grandfather away from me after Mike phoned them. Fortunately, Mike's brother intervened and restrained him. The entire event was terrifying. My mom was taping everything in case we needed proof for a restraining order, my bridesmaids were stunned, and my flower girls were crying. Dad started yelling at me as security escorted him out, saying that I was dead to him and that I would regret putting money before blood. It was simultaneously heartbreaking and humiliating. However, this is when things took a surprising turn. My stepmother, Laura, had slipped in behind Dad in all the confusion. She drew me aside after he left and asked if we could speak in private. I was completely stunned by what she disclosed. Laura believes that Aaron had purposefully orchestrated this entire wedding date catastrophe. She handed me screenshots of 3 months' worth of chats between Aaron and his fiancée. Although they had talked about a number of potential wedding dates, Aaron insisted on October 15th since it was my date. He boasted in his texts that he was going to show Dad that he loved him more than I did. The really terrible thing, though? My father was aware of this. Aaron freely shared his idea with Dad in texts that Laura showed me. Dad had replied that he understood Aaron's feelings and would back Aaron's decision, rather than shutting it down. Knowing that I would have to reschedule my date or risk losing Aaron as a part of my ceremony, Dad even assisted Aaron in booking the location. As she showed me all of this, Laura was in tears. She claimed to have witnessed Dad's favoritism of Aaron for years, but she always justified it by telling herself that Aaron needed more help because his biological father wasn't there. But after witnessing Dad's handling of this matter, she realized how poisonous things had gotten. The family dynamic I observed was only the beginning, she disclosed. It seems that Dad has been snooping around and turning down invites to family gatherings where I would be expected, claiming that I was too busy, or that I didn't want to attend. He has been giving Aaron details about my life and pushing him to match my accomplishments. In fact, when I got engaged, Dad advised Aaron to pop the question to his fiancée very far away in order to avoid falling behind. Laura expressed her sincere regret for not speaking up sooner. She claimed that she is divorcing her father because she can no longer put up with his actions, particularly after witnessing him attempt to physically threaten my grandfather at the rehearsal. She has come to the realization that Dad is actively supporting Aaron's efforts to exclude me from the family, not merely playing favorites. Despite all of this drama, I'm more sure than ever of my choice, and the wedding is tomorrow. We've hired additional security to make sure Dad can't enter the venue, and my grandfather will lead me down the aisle. I declined Mike's suggestion that we postpone if I needed more time to take it all in. I refused to let our beautiful day be ruined by Dad and Aaron's games. Some of Dad's family members continue to support him, saying that family should be together and that I'm exaggerating. I'm done feeling bad, though, after seeing those texts and seeing Dad's inebriated outburst. This is about years of emotional abuse and manipulation that I'm finally seeing clearly. It's not about the house, the money, or even who will accompany me down the aisle anymore. I just want to concentrate on my wedding for the time being, but Laura stated she would testify if I wanted a restraining order. My grandfather, mom, stepdad and my wonderful fiancé are all on my side. Perhaps it is all the family I require. If something noteworthy occurs after the wedding, I'll provide another update. Before the big day, I need to try to get some sleep right now. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support. You have no idea how much it means. Update 2. This is more twisted than I could have imagined. But here we are. Any reservations I had about removing my dad from my life have been totally dispelled by what I'm going to reveal. My grandfather escorted me down the aisle, Mike's vows brought everyone to tears of joy, and the additional security made sure there were no unwelcome disruptions. Everything about my wedding went flawlessly. Even our first married holiday was spent at my grandfather's lake house, which is now our official residence. However, I received a call from my cousin Amy yesterday. As Laura's niece, she went to Aaron's wedding, and what she told me completely upended everything. Do you recall how Dad said Aaron declined his invitation and went with his biological father? It was an outright falsehood. Amy claims that Aaron never asked Dad not to come. In reality, it was far more deliberate. 3 months before the wedding, Aaron's biological father, who had been gone all of his life, unexpectedly made a reappearance. We're talking about a $80,000 celebration at a prestigious vineyard, and he felt bad for leaving Aaron. As a way to make things right, he volunteered to cover the entire wedding. Dad felt intimidated when Aaron's biological father offered to cover half of Aaron's wedding expenses, which came to almost $40,000. It drove him insane that he couldn't match that degree of generosity. Dad viewed Aaron's reconnection with his biological father as competition rather than a positive development. The actual kicker? Dad decided not to attend the wedding himself. He informed Aaron that if the biological father was covering all of the costs, he would not go. In fact, he attempted to force Aaron to choose between having Dad serve as his best man and having his ideal wedding paid for. Dad yelled at Aaron when he decided to have the wedding paid for, of course. However, he made up the excuse about not being invited rather than telling me this. He believed that by playing the victim, he would win my sympathy and be able to lead me down the aisle. He was attempting to get into mine by using Aaron's wedding as leverage. Things worsen. Videos from Aaron's wedding reception that Amy showed me showed Dad watching from the parking lot in the background. He watched the celebration through the windows of the venue for hours while he sat in his car. No one wanted to cause a commotion by alerting security, but a few attendees observed and felt uneasy. What Dad has been telling everyone about my grandfather's gift is the most annoying thing. He is circulating allegations among the family that I looked around for a partner and offered my grandfather's house to the person who showed the greatest interest in me. He's telling people that I deceived my grandfather into giving up his land and that he's getting old. On social media, some family members have started making crude remarks about our wedding pictures since they even think he's real. A relative wrote, "It's sad how some people trade family loyalty for material gain. I hope the house was worth losing your father over," said another uncle. I drove to Dad's house because I was so furious and wanted to tell him everything I knew. A bad concept. Rather than offering an apology or even acknowledging it, he attempted to defend his behavior. He said that by inventing the tale of Aaron not inviting him, he was testing my loyalty. He said that regardless of the house gift, I would have demanded that he escort me down the aisle if I truly loved him. Then, because Aaron is also related, he had the gall to insist that Aaron receive a portion of my grandfather's present. Because it's not fair that Aaron receives nothing and I receive such a great present, he genuinely proposed that we sell the lake house and divide the proceeds. He threatened to challenge the property transfer in court when I declined. I was both relieved and appalled when I left his place. I just know that I made the proper choice every time I learned something new. After that, Laura called me and told me that ever since my grandfather made the gift announcement, Dad has been obsessed with the lake house. He and Aaron apparently thought I would allow them to use it for weekend fishing excursions since we're family. Because of Dad's disparaging remarks about my grandfather and me, I've made the decision to have my attorney write him a cease and desist letter. In order to defend himself against Dad's untrue statements on his mental health, my grandfather is also investigating his legal alternatives. Aaron has been tweeting passive-aggressively about fake family members and gold diggers on social media, but he hasn't spoken to me directly. He and anyone who backs his and Dad's story have been blocked by me. I'm concentrating on getting settled in our new house with Mike and attempting to put all of this turmoil behind us right now, but I'll give you another update if anything important occurs. Update 3. I have finally found a solution that makes me feel at peace, so this will be my last update. I've decided to stop communicating with my dad and his side of the family entirely in light of the turmoil and disclosures of the last few months. It has been a wild ride for the last 3 months. As I indicated in my previous post, Dad did attempt to challenge the transfer of the lake house. He launched a lawsuit, arguing that he ought to have some influence on my grandfather's property choices because he is my father. After my grandfather produced copious records attesting to his mental capacity and his explicit desire to transfer the land to Mike and me, his attorney finally abandoned the case. When Dad lost the court battle, his response was explosive. When he arrived at my place of employment, he created such a commotion that my employer had to bar him from the building. He yelled that I had stolen his retirement dream, implying that he and Aaron had intended to use the lake house as a fishing hideaway. Our restraining order documentation now includes the security footage of his outburst. Even more information about Dad's actions over the years was made public during Laura's divorce procedures. She discovered emails in which he and Aaron would purposefully schedule family get-togethers to clash with my crucial dates. They would purposefully plan events for when they knew I had obligations, then use my absence to portray me as the heartless relative. Spreadsheets were actually used to keep track of my schedule in order to generate these conflicts. The most startling revelation was found in Laura's divorce documents. It turns out that Dad had been putting money aside in a different account for years, money that was meant to be for Aaron and me. But according to the account statements, every cent was used on Aaron's schooling, vehicle, and now his wedding prior to Dad leaving. When Lara questioned this, Dad said my mom and grandfather could support me, so I didn't need the money. Aaron is also not managing the situation properly. It appears that his biological father's involvement backfired since following the wedding. He stopped answering Aaron's calls. Aaron has been attempting to get back in touch with his father, but he is too busy with the divorce and litigation to give him any attention. Aaron has been going on lengthy social media tirades about how I destroyed his family by stealing his future lake house and turning Lara against Dad. Through all of this, my grandfather, may he be blessed, has been a tremendous source of support. It has been touching to watch him and Mike connect over home renovation tasks as they work on remodeling portions of the lake house. This year, my mom, stepdad, grandfather, and a few close friends who supported us will be the only ones attending our first Christmas celebration there. Lara contacted me last week to inform me that, following the completion of the divorce, she would be relocating to a different state. She thanked me for giving her the confidence to go and apologize once more for not realizing Dad's manipulation sooner. Even though we're not close, I admire her for finally confronting Dad's actions. The extended family is mainly divided into two groups, those who have seen through Dad's lies and those who still believe them. It seems quite liberating to have lost contact with some relatives. They are the only family I need, and the people that matter have stayed. I'm getting used to living in a lake house with Mike. I occasionally catch myself feeling depressed about Dad's situation, but then I recall all the spreadsheets, the prearranged arguments, the deception, and the manipulation. When he decided Aaron was the only child worth his time and effort, I lost him years ago, so I know I'm not losing a parent. In times of self-doubt, your messages and remarks enabled me to maintain my position. Walking away from toxic family members, including parents, might be the healthiest course of action. Sometimes the hardest option is the correct one. After my family took over my house and tried to push me out of my own room, I kicked them all out. I am a 26-year-old who lives with my parents in a home that I fully pay for. Although it sounds rather simple, it's much more intricate than that. I'll begin at the beginning. Last year, I purchased a home in the city. I pay for everything, including food, all of the bills, and the entire mortgage. Not a single penny is paid by my parents, Liz, 55F, and Tom, 55M, who are both retired teachers. Nor was it a case of moving back home because I couldn't afford rent. As a software developer, I actually earn a nice living, and I wanted to be nearer to employment options in the city. In addition, I felt that after they had supported me for years, it would be good to return the favor. It's a pleasant 3-bedroom home with a large living room and a backyard. It's nothing fancy but comfortable. I claim the master bedroom because I pay for everything. It has its own bathroom and a walk-in closet, which is a big plus because I detest having to share a bathroom. Since I spend around 80% of my time working from home, I set up my home office in the second bedroom with 2 monitors, a comfortable chair, and all the supplies I need. For family visits, the third bedroom was kept as a guest room. Everything was wonderful at first. While I worked and took care of the house, my parents, who were glad to be in the city, went about their own business. Since they were my parents and I felt good about supporting them after everything they had done for me, I didn't mind paying the bills. Then, however, a change occurred. My mother casually dropped a bombshell during breakfast one morning. My older brother Jake, 28M, and his wife Emma, 26F, were considering relocating to the city, she said. They have reportedly been having difficulties and Emma is pregnant. They really need the help, she added. At first I didn't give it much thought. I thought that if Jake and Emma relocated, they would find a tiny apartment close by, but they have a history of jumping from one horrible circumstance to another. Things took a turn for which I was unprepared at that point. A few days later, my mother sat me down and, in her most innocent voice, informed me that Jake and Emma had been invited to remain with us, albeit only temporarily, until they were able to get back on their feet. They didn't ask if I was comfortable with this though. Oh no, they informed me after inviting them. Jake and Emma arrived with their luggage in hand, obviously intending to remain for the duration, while I was still processing the entire situation. The deal is this. As soon as Jake and Emma moved in, it was obvious they had no intention of leaving. I'm already anxious about the additional costs I'll have to pay. Now that I have 2 more people to support without anyone asking how I feel, I'm paying for everything, groceries, utilities, the mortgage, etc. Although I like my brother, Jake isn't the most responsible person. He always gets himself in a predicament where everyone else has to save him. Emma seems decent enough, but I don't like her entitled attitude, which makes me feel like everyone should take care of her because she's expecting. Almost instantly, the tension began to rise. Emma began making these innocuous-sounding remarks a few days after they moved home, but they are really bothersome. For example, "This place is so big, it must be hard for you to clean it all by yourself." Or, "When the baby stuff arrives, we're going to need a lot of space." At first, I didn't give it much thought. However, things became more heated one evening. Emma and Jake drew me away and said they needed a conversation. I hoped they would give financial assistance or perhaps apologize for the additional strain they were placing on me. However, no. "So we've been thinking it would make more sense if we took the master bedroom," explains Emma in a relaxed tone. Jake interrupted. "Yeah, the baby's going to need a lot of stuff, and your room has the walk-in closet and private bathroom." And I blinked, thinking I could have misheard. Let me remind you, these two were sitting here recommending that I give up my own room for them and their unborn child, even though I pay the mortgage and everything else. I was suddenly struck with boldness. I said, "Why don't you just take the guest room?" While maintaining my composure. "It's quite large." Emma looked at me as if I had just made a ridiculous suggestion. "There isn't a walk-in closet in that room," she stated. "The infant will require room." I was finished. I refused to give up my room. "You can either locate another place to stay or use the guest room." Jake was somewhat taken aback. As if he was surprised that I wasn't simply giving in. However, Emma was blatantly insulted. I realized then that things weren't going to work out. Things quickly started to go south. I observed Jake and Emma become quite at ease over the course of the following few days. Their belongings were all over the place, with baby magazines strewn on the dining table and shoes kicked off by the couch. Emma even began discussing the crib's location as if she had already made up her mind that they would remain in the master bedroom. I had to attend a meeting in the office one day. For the remainder of the night, the house was strangely quiet. Nobody tried to quarrel with me or knock on my door. They must have realized at last that I was no longer playing around. They didn't deserve to reside in my home if they didn't respect me. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. First update. I was hoping for a dramatic outburst, or for everyone to finally take me seriously once I handed out the eviction papers. Rather, there was an uncomfortable silence in the home. Due in part to my inability to fall asleep, I woke up earlier than usual the following morning. I was waiting for a certain event. Perhaps my parents would try to persuade me, or Jake might knock on my door and insist that I change my decision. However, none of that took place. The house was deserted when I woke up and entered the kitchen. No parents, no Emma, and no Jake. I even wondered, wishful thinking I suppose, if they packed up and departed in the middle of the night. I waited for someone to say something, anything at all, while I sat at the table and made my coffee. I had no desire to engage in small talk or repeat my explanation. I wasn't going to back down now that I'd drawn my line. I couldn't continue living that way. They had pushed me too far. They showed me no respect, and they certainly showed no respect for the fact that I was footing the bill. My mother eventually entered the kitchen. She appeared to have had little sleep. She simply got a cup of coffee and sat across from me without saying anything at first. It was strange that neither of us knew how to respond to the awkward silence. The stillness was finally broken by her. She spoke softly and wearily. "Honey, I know things have gotten out of hand." I just stared at my coffee and waited for her to continue without saying anything. Even though I knew she would have to apologize in some way, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She went on, her voice shaking slightly. "I didn't realize how bad things had gotten between you and your brother. I guess I didn't see how unfair it was to you. We were just trying to help them." I was surprised by that. At least not this quickly. I didn't think she would confess. I briefly believed that perhaps she was finally realizing that I wasn't the bad guy in this scenario. However, I was still unable to get over my irritation with all that had transpired. With a stronger tone than I meant, I responded, "You didn't just ignore what I wanted. You always took his side, as if you thought I would give in and let them have whatever they wanted." She stared down at her coffee for a few seconds before speaking. "I understand," she muttered. "However, we reasoned that you've always been the more resilient one. He has never had it easy, Jake." She always used that as an excuse. Jake required more help, he wasn't strong, and he had struggled more. Since I was the one with my life together, it seemed as though they didn't believe I had any boundaries. "You also believe that I've had it easy?" With my rage seething just below the surface, I asked. "This residence was purchased by me. The mortgage is paid by me. The groceries are paid for by me. Do you really believe that I can continue carrying you all indefinitely?" She nodded and groaned. "You're correct. We couldn't have asked for anything more from you. However, Jake, the baby, is on the way." I interrupted her. "The baby is not the point of this. You guys haven't shown me any respect, and this is about that. She looked tired as she sighed once again. We believed we were acting appropriately, she ultimately stated. Emma and Jake don't have much. And who is to blame for that? I fired back. I didn't request that they move in. None of this was requested of me. You can't keep saving them by putting me in a bad position. They need to learn how to live their own lives. She seemed to finally comprehend, or at least attempt to, as she nodded. She said, "We'll figure something out," in a softer tone. "But don't push us away, please. Not in this manner." I tried to relax and sat back. Since they were my parents, I didn't want to expel them. However, I also couldn't continue to live this way. They would have to leave if things didn't change. I said, as quietly as possible, "I don't want to push you out. However, things must change. I can't continue to be treated like I don't belong in my own home." She simply nodded silently without arguing. "All right," she said. "We'll find a solution." She then walked out of the kitchen, leaving me to think alone once more. At least it seemed like they were beginning to take me seriously, even though I wasn't sure if anything would actually change. When Jake eventually arrived later that afternoon, he appeared to have been holding his rage all day. He simply dropped down across from me in the living room, wearing the same angry look he had worn ever since I delivered him the eviction notice, without saying hello or anything else. I also remained silent and focused solely on my phone. "So this is how things will be?" At last, he spat, his voice dripping with resentment. "Are you really going to expel us?" I hardly raised my gaze. "I gave you a day. I'm going to contact the police if you're still here tomorrow." Jake snorted and shook his head as if I were the villain. "We are related. You don't treat your family like this." I reclined back in my chair and placed my phone down. "Yes, family members also don't take advantage of one another. Do you really think you can just take over my house after weeks of freeloading without doing anything? Jake, I'm not your backup plan." After that, he didn't say much. For a minute, he sat there, obviously wanting to dispute, but he ran out of things to say. He understood I wasn't bluffing because I had outlined my criteria. Jake stood up, mumbling to himself, and went off again after a few more uncomfortable moments of stillness. Jake was typical, always fleeing when he didn't get his way. Almost too peacefully, the remainder of the day went by. Even though I had no idea what Jake and Emma would do, I wasn't going to change my mind. They had more than enough time to work things out, yet all they had done was snoop me. Everything would be decided in the following 24 hours. Second update, I got up early once more on the morning of their eviction deadline. I was aware that today would either be the day Jake and Emma moved out or compelled me to file a lawsuit. Oddly enough, I no longer felt angry. I didn't even feel nervous. The only thing left to do was to follow through on what I had already recognized had to happen. The home was still eerily quiet when I woke up and went into the kitchen. Almost like the quiet before a storm, it felt different. Even though the refrigerator was still very empty from Jake and Emma's most recent grocery run, I prepared myself some breakfast. I was able to pull together enough money for a good supper, and as I ate, I couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had gotten out of hand. It was all right only a few months ago. I was doing well with my parents. Life was wonderful, I was working, and I was paying my expenses. Everything went haywire when Jake and Emma arrived. When individuals begin to feel entitled to things they didn't earn, it's amazing how quickly things can shift. I heard footsteps in the corridor a few hours later. After entering the kitchen and getting a cup of coffee, my dad took a seat at the table across from me. At first, he sipped his coffee and gazed out the window without saying anything. I couldn't tell whether he was upset with me or simply unsure of how to respond. The silence was finally broken by him. He muttered, "Jake and Emma are leaving today." I took a while to reply. Although I felt awful about it, I knew that this was the proper thing to do. I couldn't continue to allow them to exploit me, and if it meant they had to go, then so be it. With a quiet voice, my dad remarked, "They have nowhere to go. Until they work things out, they will be staying at a hotel for a while." Mid-bite, I paused and turned to face him. I did experience some guilt, but I pushed it away right immediately. They hadn't done anything to help themselves, even though I had given them plenty of time to get their act together. I said in a firm voice, "I gave them a chance. They gave me no other option." My father did not quarrel. He simply nodded and took another sip of his coffee, without attempting to guilt-trip me as I had assumed he would. I believe he eventually realized that this time, I wasn't going to back down. We couldn't return to the way things were after everything that had transpired. Jake and Emma began packing their belongings at lunchtime. I spent the majority of it in my room because I didn't want to argue with anyone else or hear more passive-aggressive remarks. However, I knew something was going to happen when I heard Jake's voice growing louder from down the corridor after a time. Jake did really knock on my door. He was standing there with the same irate expression he had had since the beginning of this whole situation when I opened it. "Are you really going to allow this to occur?" His voice was stern as he inquired. "You're simply going to dismiss us in this manner?" I leaned against the doorframe with my arms crossed. "I gave you a day. You were aware of what had to occur." Jake clenched his jaw, obviously attempting to control his rage. "Dude, we're family. You don't treat your family like this." I inhaled deeply while attempting to maintain my composure. "Families do not exploit one another. I won't throw you out without cause. For weeks, you have been wasting your time here without making any contributions. I've been covering everything, including the groceries and the mortgage. And you attempted to evict me from my own home and seize my room instead of showing gratitude. I will not allow that to occur." For a few seconds Jake remained silent. He was obviously furious, but he had nothing more to dispute about. Even though he didn't want to acknowledge it, he knew I was correct. "That's it then?" At last he muttered in a quiet voice. "You're simply dismissing us." I answered, "I'm giving you the same option I gave you yesterday. You have two options. Either move somewhere else or respect my personal space by remaining in the guest room. However, you're going to leave if you're unable to accomplish it." Jake gave me one last look, then turned and left without saying anything else. I took a deep breath and shut the door. Although I knew it had to be done, the entire scenario had been draining. Jake and Emma had left by mid-afternoon. Sincerely, I didn't want to watch them go, so I didn't. A dramatic farewell was unnecessary. Without a word to me, they packed up their belongings, put them in their car and drove away. After they left, the house was calmer and less tense. For the remainder of the day I didn't hear much from my parents. They were probably still assimilating everything that had transpired. Despite her outward signs of distress, my mother remained silent. Perhaps she now understood that Jake and Emma had pushed me too far, and this was the outcome, and that I wasn't the cause of it all. My mother knocked on my door that night. She entered, took a seat on my bed's edge and gazed at the floor for a long time. She was clearly struggling to find the proper words. She whispered, "They're gone." Without a word I nodded. She said, "I never thought it would get to this point. I was unaware of the amount of pressure we were placing on you." I felt some of the frustration subside as I gazed at her. I tried to defend my position by saying, "It's not that I didn't want to help. However, you guys treated me as if my needs and personal space weren't significant." She nodded and groaned. "You're correct, we ought to have noticed it sooner." For several minutes, neither of us really knew what to say next, so we sat in silence. Although I could tell she was upset, at least she now appeared to get my point. After a while, I broke the stillness and said, "I don't want you and Dad to leave. But I can't continue living this way if things don't change." She stood up slowly and nodded once more. "We'll work it out," she said. "I promise, things will be different." I experienced an odd mixture of relief and fatigue as she walked out of the room. There was still work to be done with my parents, but the matter with Jake and Emma was finally resolved. Even though I knew it wouldn't be simple, at least they seemed open to listening now. I felt as though I could breathe for the first time in weeks. The strain that had been choking me was gone, and the house was silent. Although it wasn't a flawless solution, I was at least able to regain my privacy and, more significantly, my respect. The house fell into a spooky silence when Jake and Emma left. Although I felt as though I could breathe at last, the incident continued to nag at the back of my mind. Even though I had won the fight for my room and my respect, I still questioned whether or not my relationship with my parents would ever truly return to normal. There was no turning back after I had drawn a firm line. Nevertheless, I thought that we could manage to proceed without all of the stress. The following days were peaceful, almost too quiet. My parents were largely private. Occasionally, my mother would say something courteous, but we never discussed the incident. My dad, who has always been the more reticent one, seems to completely avoid any confrontational situations. I wasn't sure if they were still processing everything that had happened or if this was their way of giving me space. In any case, I was fine with the silence. In order to avoid thinking about anything, I threw myself into my work in my home office for the majority of the day. Now, the office served as both my haven and my escape from the turmoil of the previous several weeks. However, I would occasionally catch myself reflecting on how things had transpired. Even though I knew I had made the correct decision, I couldn't help but feel a little awful about how everything had gone so wrong. Something had to give because I had been taken advantage of for far too long. A week or so following Jake and Emma's departure, my mother entered my office as I was working. She seemed to be thinking about something, judging by the way she hovered at the entrance. Are you free for a moment? Her voice was strangely gentle as she inquired. I turned to her and nodded, saving my work. What's going on? She nervously wrung her hands as she entered the room. Everything has been on my mind, including Jake, Emma, and our treatment of you. I remained silent so she could talk. She seemed to have something she wanted to talk about. Her voice cracked slightly as she said, I just wanted to say that we didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. We believed that we were assisting Jake, but now I realize that we were overburdening you. We took advantage of the fact that you have done more for us than we could have ever dreamed for. I apologize. I was taken by surprise by the apology. Although I had anticipated some sort of recognition soon, it was more painful for me to hear her express it so bluntly. Her honesty was evident in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I had the impression that she genuinely knew how I was feeling. I tried to speak steadily as I said, Thank you, Mom. However, it was more than simply the house or the money. Respect was at issue. I had the impression that none of you respected me or the work I was doing to keep things going. Although I didn't mind assisting, I couldn't continue to live like this. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye and nodded. You're correct. We ought to have honored your personal space. It won't occur once more. Long emotional chats weren't my thing, but this one felt essential. I felt as though a burden had been removed, and I could now envision a way forward free from ongoing conflict and animosity. I got a little regretful grin from my mom, and she went back to the kitchen. For several minutes, I sat there, taking in what had been spoken. Although it was not a complete resolution, it was a positive step. A few weeks later was the actual turning moment. By that time, a new routine had been established in the house. The unpleasant atmosphere that had pervaded every room since Jake and Emma's departure had gradually subsided, and my parents were more considerate of my personal space. After living in a battle zone for the past few months, I could finally feel the house turning back into a home. My dad was seated at the kitchen table one evening, looking especially serious, when I got home after an office meeting. Typically, my dad preferred to leave most of the hard talking to my mom. However, I could tell he had something significant to say by the way he was sitting and looking into his coffee cup. Trying to keep things informal, I said, Hey, and got a drink out of the refrigerator. Is everything all right? His countenance was contemplative as he looked up. I've wanted to speak with you. Curious but not really concerned with what he had to say, I took a seat across from him. Leaning forward with his hands clasped in front of him, he inhaled deeply. About the house and all of your efforts to maintain this place. I remained silent since I could tell he needed to vent. His voice was low as he started, I realize I haven't said much. However, I've given it a lot of thought. I want you to know how much I appreciate all that you have done for this family, more than any of us could have ever imagined. I was surprised. Hearing my dad speak those words felt important because he wasn't the kind to open up like this. He went on, You've carried more than your fair share, and you didn't ask for any of this. I apologize for the way things ended between Jake and Emma, and I just wanted to let you know that I see it. It struck me differently when he acknowledged everything I had gone through than when my mother apologized because I could see he had been holding on to this for some time. Although neither meant more than the other, my dad's reserved demeanor somehow gave his remarks a deeper meaning. I said, Thanks, Dad, since I was at a loss for words. That is very significant. He took another sip of his coffee and nodded. All I want is for things to improve for everyone. Although the chat was brief, it was sufficient. He seemed sincere and I had the impression that things were at last beginning to improve at that precise moment. Over the next few weeks, things kept getting better. I no longer felt like I was bearing the burden of the home by myself once my parents and I established a new routine. They began to assist more, cleaning, helping with groceries, and generally showing me respect for my personal space. Although it wasn't flawless, it was a significant step up from our previous situation. After they departed, I didn't hear much from Jake and Emma. According to my mom, they were looking for a place of their own and were spending some time in a motel. I refrained from prying. Even though I adored my brother, I needed him to learn how to be independent, so I had set clear limits. I'd be happy to stay away for a while if that meant it. About a month after the entire incident, Jake texted me one afternoon. It was succinct and direct, not his typical tone, but it sounded genuine. Hey, I understand that things went wrong. I simply wanted to apologize for the way things turned out. I hope we can speak soon as we work things out. I looked at the message for a long time, unsure of how to react. A part of me was grateful for the gesture, but another part of me was still upset about how everything had turned out. I took a while to respond. It took me longer to process. I took some time that evening to write a response, attempting to be polite yet explicit about my position. I appreciate the message. I'm happy that you two are working things out. I need some time, but I hope we can communicate soon as well. When both of us are ready, let's catch up. A weird sensation of closure came over me as I pushed send. Even though I didn't expect things to be flawless, at least we could communicate once more. A few weeks ago, that was more than I could have imagined. I started to feel more at ease with everything as time passed. My parents were finally accepting my boundaries, and there was no longer any tension in the house. Above all, I regained my sense of control over my life and my personal space. The journey here was not simple. One of the most difficult things I had ever had to do was to stand up for myself, especially when it meant going against my family. However, it was ultimately worthwhile. I had gained an important lesson. Even in your own family, respect is something you have to earn. It is not something you can demand. I had earned mine too. In retrospect, I'm happy I didn't give up. It would have been simple to give in and let Jake and Emma take over my room, to allow my parents to continue to manage the house as if I were a visitor. I didn't want that life though. I'd longed for my own personal space and dignity, and suddenly I had both. Perhaps Jake and Emma's situation will change in the future. Perhaps we'll be as close as we were before all of this drama. However, for the time being, I'm only concerned with living my life as I need to, and for the first time in a long time, that feels sufficient. Paid for my wife's family vacation, but sister-in-law excluded me. At checkout, when she expected me to cover her bill, I made her pay. I never imagined feeling this depressed while lounging in an upscale Miami Beach resort. A family vacation that was supposed to be unforgettable has become a nightmare because of my sister-in-law, Ella, 38F. I am accompanied by my wife, Ray, 42F, her aging parents, 76M and 70F, and Ella. We have been married for 10 amazing years. I'm already at my wit's end because of Ella's treatment of me just 2 days into this vacation. Over the past 10 years, Ray and I have established a pleasant life together. We have both put in a lot of effort to get to the senior positions we currently hold at our respective firms. Our success is reflected in our lifestyle. To break up the routine of our hectic lives, we take at least 3 large vacations a year in addition to a number of weekend excursions. We are able to travel widely since we decided not to have children. We've made it a point to take Ray's parents along on one of our yearly vacations for the past 2 years. Her mother finds it difficult to travel with her father alone as his health has been progressively deteriorating. The trip this summer was particularly meaningful because Ray's father had mentioned that he had always wanted to go to Miami, where he and his wife had gone on their honeymoon almost 50 years prior. He spoke of it with a certain fervor that betrayed a dread that this would be his final opportunity to relive those treasured recollections. Given how expensive a week in Miami would be, I promptly turned down his offer to help with the costs. I wanted to do this for these individuals since they have been treating me like their own kid for the past 10 years. I can easily afford such costs because of my financial circumstances, and it was well worth the money to witness their happiness upon returning to Miami. When Ella asked to go with us, our journey took a very different turn. Ella has always been in a hard spot financially, unlike Ray and me. Her husband's salary hardly meets the necessities for her 3 school-age children. She would always remark that she hadn't been able to afford a real vacation since her honeymoon whenever we shared pictures from our trips. She came up to us directly this year about going to Miami. I consented even though I knew I would be responsible for all of her costs. Family should support family, after all. Ella's behavior seemed strange from the moment we arrived in Miami. Only a few hours after arriving at our beach resort, the first warning sign arrived. Ella recommended that the family take a picture in front of the breathtaking ocean scenery. In order to get everyone in the photo, I grabbed my phone and prepared to set the timer. She stopped me at that point. "Oh, would you just snap the photo for us? Mom, Dad, Ray and I are the only 4 people we desire." Her remarks were like a kick to the face. I said nothing, figuring they might have preferred a single picture of their original family. However, this was not an isolated incident. Ella made it the central topic of our trip. She would find a way to keep me out of every restaurant, tourist attraction, and special occasion. She kept saying, "Oh, just the 4 of us," or, "This one's just for family." I took over as the official photographer, spending all of my time behind the lens rather than creating memories with my wife and in-laws. Even worse, Ella began sharing these pictures on social media, fabricating a story about this family vacation in which I didn't exist. My in-laws would encourage me to participate in the pictures, and Ray would occasionally step in and stress that I was also family, but Ella always managed to sway the situation until I was back in front of the camera. For their ideal family reunion, I seemed to be nothing more than a walking ATM and personal photographer. I was looking forward to unwinding in the immaculate pool with its stunning ocean view after a long day of trekking and touring. I was about to enter the water when Ella hit me once again. Will you be able to stay out a while? We want a picture of a girl that only includes Mom, Ray and me. What began as a seemingly simple request ended up involving me standing by the pool for an hour while Ella staged an ongoing photo session. The women appeared first, followed by a picture of a sibling and then another original family picture. Every time I attempted to join them, she would come up with a new combination that conveniently left me out. If my presence was such a hassle, I couldn't help but wonder why she had bothered to come on this vacation. The following day's boat ride incident was far more obvious. When we got to the tourist destination, they provided calm boat rides along the shore. Families with 4 people would love the boat's 2 rows of 2 seats apiece. However, we were only 5. Ella stepped right in with her idea before anybody else could offer a reasonable rotation scheme. She insisted that this arrangement would be perfect for family photos, and made arrangements for Ray's parents to sit together in one row while she took the seat next to Ray in the second. In the subsequent boat, I found myself surrounded by strangers. They also purchased a memento of their boat ride with the family. This is the text, punctuated and clearly divided into paragraphs. Currently, Ella's social media feed features the picture. My entire holiday experience was well captured in the souvenir photo from the boat excursion, when I was awkwardly crammed between strangers as my wife and her family had wonderful memories without me. I couldn't help but observe that I was always the one who had to be left out of any situation. Even though I was paying for this entire vacation, Ella never once volunteered to trade places or take turns being the odd one out. It was the same for dinner at the fancy seafood restaurant. I had been looking forward to this reservation for weeks, particularly asking for a prime table with an unhindered view of the sunset at one of Miami's most upscale waterfront restaurants. The hostess escorted us to a circular table for 6 when we got there, which was well situated to capture the golden hour light across the ocean. Ray's parents were seated across from us, and I had imagined us sitting together and taking in the scenery while we shared this beautiful time. Since Ella was a last-minute addition to our trip, she might have easily grabbed a seat on the side. Rather, Ella sat beside Ray before anyone could even bring out a chair, and her parents, of course, took the best seats. With my back to the sunset, I had deliberately planned this dinner around. I was forced into the worst conceivable position, between Ray's parents and the crowded server station. Ella's true colors came out when Ray attempted to defend me by proposing that we reorganize the seating. Telling Ray to stop being so clingy and reminding everyone that this was a family holiday, she yelled at her sister. As the evening wore on, the dinner only grew worse. I made an effort to engage in the discussion in the hopes of discovering some points of agreement, but Ella had other ideas. She would purposefully direct the conversation away from me and toward things like high school escapades, family inside jokes, and childhood recollections whenever I tried to participate. Ella would constantly interrupt and reroute the conversation, even when Ray and her parents attempted to incorporate me by providing background or making connections between stories and current affairs. I felt like an outsider peering in at my own dinner table because of the unbreakable wall of shared history she built. I had stopped attempting to join in by the time dessert came. It was during our scheduled spa day that the last insult occurred. I had carefully set up private suites in the resort's opulent spa, one for Ella alone, one for her parents, and one for Ray and myself. I believed that the 4 of us could still enjoy the spa treatments together until my father-in-law opted to stay back at the beach because he wasn't feeling well. Ella, however, saw another chance to keep me out. She smiled and said they needed a girls' day at the spa, so I should keep her father company instead. She was once again forcing me to cancel an event I had organized and paid for, and she was using my father-in-law's illness as leverage to make me appear self-centered if I objected. The manipulation was clear. Despite not going as planned, the day ended up being better than I had anticipated. My father-in-law and I had one of our most sincere talks ever while we were sitting on the beach. We connected in a level we had never experienced before as he told us stories about his life and gave insights from his years of expertise. I wanted to vent my aggravation that had been building up over the trip by telling him how his younger daughter was treating me. However, I couldn't bring myself to burden him with family trouble when I watched him relish the ocean wind and share his recollections with such contentment. One night in our hotel room, I had attempted to have a private conversation with Ray about this. She admitted that I felt upset, but her remark only made me more perplexed. She explained how their father's frequent military deployments had affected their childhood and implied that Ella's actions might not have been deliberate. Ella may be frantically attempting to relive those lost family times as their father's health deteriorates. They seldom ever took formal family holidays together. I started to doubt myself after hearing Ray's explanation. Did I come out as too sensitive? I was paying for the vacation, so was it improper of me to expect to be included? I realized how much Ella's actions had damaged my confidence since I was even doubting my right to be wounded. Update 1. The influx of encouraging comments I received after posting about my difficulties online confirmed what I'd been feeling all along. People remarked that Ella's exclusionary behavior was too regular to be coincidental and that her behaviors demonstrated deliberate aim rather than careless oversight. Their viewpoints made it clearer to me that this was about fundamental respect and acknowledgement as a family member, not about having the right to be included just because I paid. My wife attempted to use their early experiences to justify her sister's actions, but the truth was more straightforward. Whatever Ella's reason, what she was doing wasn't acceptable. The persistent isolation and disrespect had gotten out of hand by the last few days of our journey to Miami. My breaking point was finally reached the morning before we left. In our hotel room, I sought some alone time with Ray and confronted her about her passive attitude during the trip, but her response remained centered on maintaining harmony. Although she admitted to observing Ella's actions, she maintained that confronting her would just cause drama and ruin what might be one of their father's final family vacations. Although what she said made sense, it seemed like yet another betrayal. Once more, family unity was being sacrificed at the expense of my sentiments. Something changed inside of me at that very instant. I nodded in agreement with Ray's request to move on, but my mind was already working out a strategy. Ella had joyfully savored the opulent lodging and facilities I was offering her, and she had spent the entire vacation treating me like an unwanted stranger. She seems to have forgotten that I was paying for every meal, activity, and spa treatment she had received during this entire trip. Maybe it was time to let her know exactly what it meant to pretend that I wasn't a member of the family. I started my strategy on the last morning we were in Miami. Claiming that Ella and I would follow, I casually advised Ray to take her parents to the airport before us. Ray quickly saw through my motives. "I understand what you're attempting to accomplish," she muttered. Her little nod was all the acknowledgement I needed. "Sure you know," I said, "and now you can remain neutral, as you have been for the whole trip." Ray appeared prepared to let karma run its course after observing her sister routinely keep me out of every family gathering for a week. When they were gone, I brought my well-thought-out plan to the front desk. The hotel's billing method was advantageous to me. All extra fees accrued during the stay were paid at checkout, even though the room rates had been paid in advance. Assuming I would pay for everything, this included every room service order, spa treatment and poolside cocktail Ella had freely consumed. In an attempt to justify it for tax purposes, I asked the management to divide the bills by suite. The request was so routine that the manager didn't even bat an eye. I couldn't help but think about how Ella had never considered the financial or emotional consequences of her actions as I stood there watching him come to terms with the separation. That was about to change. I paid for my own accommodation and my in-laws' suite and then waited for the big reveal. Ray's father's mobility challenges and wheelchair arrangements required additional time, so she and her parents were already en route to the airport. Ella and I were alone in the hotel lobby after that. Ella's face was devoid of color as she gazed at the itemized bill in her hands when the manager summoned her down to settle her account. The sum was astounding, likely many months' worth of her typical spending. As reality struck in, her uncertainty turned to panic as her gaze shifted between the bill and my face. "You're not covering mine?" Then I remained calm. "I've already paid for my family. You can cover for yourself." Ella struggled with her credit card and gave it to the manager, her hand trembling a little. My suspicions were only verified by the declined transaction notification. She had been living far beyond her means for the entire week, confident that I would pay for it. Her credit limit was not even close to covering half of her debt, even when the manager swiped her card once again. She was now feeling the effects of all those girls-only spa days and fancy dinners, and this time, her assigned ATM wasn't saving her. It was pure theater for the next half hour in the hotel lobby. Ella paced back and forth, attempting to come up with a plan for dealing with this sudden issue. She would look at me frantically every few minutes, obviously hoping that I would give in and offer to pay, but I remained seated on the comfortable couch in the lobby, appearing composed while relishing every moment of her situation. I knew that if she had just apologized for her actions during the journey, I could have ended her agony with a swipe of my card. However, Ella's pride prevented her from doing so. Rather, as though she still had the right to my money after a week of treating me like an unwanted invader, she wanted me to offer to help. She finally took the call she had been putting off. As she described the circumstances, I could hear her husband's anger rising over the phone. He was demanding to know how she could spend so carelessly, as the bill she had accrued was almost equal to his entire monthly salary. The money was finally transmitted to pay the account after what seemed like an eternity of difficult conversations and perhaps some desperate promises on her part. Ella sat quietly in the taxi on the way to the airport, perhaps still analyzing her husband's reaction upon her return home. Her problems were far from done, but she was unaware of this. She found out I hadn't finished her flight check-in when we got to the airport, which was already getting close to departure time. She was left standing in the ordinary line, fumbling with her bags and getting more and more agitated as she watched the minutes pass, while I breezed through priority check-in. When I had discreetly booked business class upgrades for Ray, her parents, and myself at the gate, a pleasant surprise to round off their trip comfortably, that was the last straw. But Ella stuck with her original budget seat. The full tale was conveyed by the expression on her face as she walked past our roomy business class seats. She remained silent, but her stiff posture and clenched jaw said a lot. We had first-class service up front, but she sat in economy the whole time. At last, Ella's calmness broke the instant we touched down. Tears were streaming down her face as she started into her account of events, virtually running to her parents at baggage claim. Her dramatic account claimed that I had purposefully denied her the flight upgrades, humiliated her in public, and left her at the hotel. Conveniently, she omitted the bit about her week-long effort to keep me out of every family activity. As she went on with her performance, her father, who was already exhausted from the trip, became clearly upset. She was too preoccupied with portraying herself as the victim of my alleged mistreatment to care about his health, even at this precise moment. Throughout Ella's performance, I remained composed and waited for the appropriate opportunity to argue my position. When I did talk, I described how she had deliberately kept me out of every family activity while on a trip that I had paid for. One by one, I exposed every family-only picture, every stage sitting arrangement, and every purposefully private conversation. The reasoning was straightforward. Why should she ask me to pay for her costs as family if she didn't think of me as family enough to be included in the memories? When her mother stepped in, her performance abruptly stopped. Ray's mother had had enough of her daughter's antics after a week. Firmly, "Ella, enough," she said. "We don't want to get involved. We noticed you cornering him the whole time. We urged you to include him, but you had your own plans to sideline him. Now deal with it." Ella reacted even more brutally, refusing to take responsibility. When she accused me of controlling the family with money, her true colors came out. "You partnered with your husband to humiliate your sister, your own blood," she yelled, turning to face Ray. "You'll see what this man is going to do to you. He's going to sleep with another woman right under your nose, and you won't be able to do anything. You're blinded by his money." Ray responded angrily to the unfounded accusation, making the baggage claim area seem like a scene from a family drama. Without Ray's father, the situation might have been worse. He had sat in respectful silence the entire journey, watching everything but saying little. His straightforward remark, "Ella, your brother-in-law has done enough for you. If you can't appreciate it, better keep your mouth shut," put an end to Ella's outburst, but the harm to family ties had already been done. There was a profound stillness in the airport terminal following my father-in-law's last remarks. With quiet firmness, he asked to depart right away, and I hurriedly assisted him to the car. Ella stood there by herself as we drove off. Even though she was 70 miles from home, she was too proud to beg for a ride. I knew the taxi fee would be exorbitant because she had arrived with us and hadn't brought her own car to the airport. However, after a week of her purposeful seclusion, I lost the will to care. It was a quiet journey to my in-laws' house. They both sincerely thanked us for the vacation when we got there. The extended embrace from my father-in-law conveyed more than words could possibly express. Everything was validated by that hug. After we got home, Ray and I resumed our regular routines and at first avoided talking about what had transpired. Until Ray finally broke the quiet a few days later, the subject remained unexplored. She disclosed that Ella was dealing with severe financial repercussions. Her husband was seeking full reimbursement since he was upset over having to save her. Ella found it difficult to handle the payback as well as her usual credit card obligations when he declined to save her pompous butt, as he described it. Ray was in favor of what I was doing, but she subtly hinted that I could have gone too far. However, she admitted that her sister had required this wake-up call even as she was saying it. For years, Ella had treated people with disdain and exploited their charity. It felt like long overdue justice that she was now being held accountable for her acts. I was able to honestly respond that I didn't regret my choices when Ray asked. Ella had selected her own tuition, by her actions, and often the most expensive lessons are also the most successful. An update on Thanksgiving: I got a range of responses after posting my tale online. Some said that I was too severe and that I ought to have just paid the price to maintain harmony. In order to finance everyone's lavish vacation, they wanted me to be a doormat and silently accept being treated like an outsider. However, I refuse to be used that way since I'm aware of my value. I only wanted Ella to be treated with basic respect and included in family events. I never intended her to grovel or become my servant. Her pride was more important to her than making amends, yet even after everything, I would have paid for her expenditures if she had just admitted her mistake and apologized. In actuality, Ella and I never had a close relationship. When she would visit Ray, our interaction was limited to courteous greetings at family events. Over the years, we didn't have any meaningful conversations or a true connection. Nevertheless, because she was family, I readily agreed to pay for her trip when she requested to go on the vacation. That kindness ought to have at least gained her some fundamental respect, but instead it seemed to strengthen her resolve to keep me out of her life. Ella's husband was still furious that he had to spend all of his money to pay for her exorbitant expenses. She had accrued a bill that was almost equivalent to his monthly wage. If their spouse spent a week acting like a princess on someone else's alleged dime, no working individual would be pleased to see their hard-earned money go. However, rather than take ownership of her actions, Ella did what she does best, which is to fabricate a story in which I am the villain who purposefully humiliated her and she is the victim. Knowing that Thanksgiving might be one of the final holidays spent with my father-in-law due to his deteriorating health, my mother-in-law had been organizing an extra special celebration during the planning stages. However, Ella's husband's refusal to go threw a wrench in the preparations. Why? He couldn't tolerate being seated at the same table as someone who would make fun of someone who wasn't as wealthy. My mother-in-law finally had enough at that point. She sat him down and told him everything about Ella's actions on the trip to Miami. She said to him, "Check out the pictures from the vacation. Really look at them." Ella's own social media posts had photo after photo of me being purposefully left out, shoved behind the camera, or forced to sit apart. It was impossible to ignore the visible evidence of my systematic exclusion. My mother-in-law described how she and my father-in-law had made several attempts to involve me, but Ella had always found new methods to keep me out of the picture. I had always respected Ella's husband, so this was very painful. Although we weren't close friends, we always had cordial and courteous interactions on Thanksgiving and other holidays. I had never denigrated him because of his financial circumstances. I had never even entertained such ideas. We were only two men who had joined the same family and were doing our best to provide for our wives and help out where we could. Ella would go to great lengths to avoid accepting responsibility for her actions, as seen by the way she had tricked him into viewing me as a classist villain. After everything that had transpired, I was hesitant to attend Thanksgiving dinner, but I went out of respect for my father-in-law. A convenient explanation of visiting his parents was used to justify Ella and her husband's absence. The true story, which was far more repulsive than I had anticipated, didn't surface until after my father-in-law had gone to bed. It seemed that a significant argument in Ella's marriage had been sparked by the Miami incident. Instead of gaining humility from the event, she had used her shame as fuel to continuously disparage her husband based on his income. Even though she only worked 20 hours a week as a part-time employee, she started pressuring him to take on a second job on top of his full-time job. He accepted the reasonable requirement that he take a break from childcare and domestic chores in exchange for looking for more work. This concession infuriated Ella. Ella's husband had sobbed while telling her everything, according to my mother-in-law. It was astounding how much was expected of him. While she had a relaxed schedule, Ella wanted him to work well over 40 hours a week and still handle his fair share of household duties. It seems that the entitled attitude that had been so noticeable during our trip to Miami was only the beginning. After spending a week accruing debt she was unable to pay, the woman was now criticizing her diligent husband for not giving her a more opulent lifestyle. Ella's mother-in-law had done everything she could to help her see the light. She tried to convince Ella that her demands were unrealistic, supported her son-in-law, and gave advice to her daughter. However, it appeared that Ella had become dangerously aroused by the taste of luxury during our journey to Miami. Once claiming to be happy with modest family holidays, the woman was suddenly consumed with leading a life she hadn't earned. The situation got so bad that my mother-in-law had to give a firm order at last. She bluntly advised Ella that she shouldn't count on the family's support if her actions resulted in a divorce. More significantly, she was cautioned not to discuss marital issues with her father because the stress of seeing his daughter's marriage fall apart due to her newfound materialism was too much for his health. Ray and I thought about how our well-meaning invitation had gone awry on the way home from Thanksgiving dinner. There's no turning back once you taste the luxury of a private island. I recalled a remark I'd seen on display at the resort. Once you experience the luxury of a private island, you'd never set foot on a public one. This also applied to someone who had entered business class after years of economy. Her spouse was now suffering because we had unintentionally allowed Ella to see a way of life she couldn't support. I felt bad about the whole thing, not because I forced her to pay her own expenses, but because I exposed her to a lifestyle that had so thoroughly distorted her viewpoint. She momentarily had luxury, But now her husband, a kind man who worked hard to support his family, was being punished for not being able to sustain it. All I could do was hope she would change her mind before ruining her marriage to live a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Parents accused me of an affair with my brother-in-law, threw me out, and tried to destroy my career. The shocking truth uncovered. Over the past 6 years, I have established a prosperous career as a senior programmer at a large software business. My parents insist on family values and sticking together, so even though I make more than enough money to live on my own in a wonderful apartment, I've been living with them. Although they have always been domineering, I persuaded myself that it was simply their expression of affection. The environment in our home has always been complicated. This is also where my sister Emily, 32F, and her husband James, 34M reside. 3 years ago, James obtained a job close by, and our parents were overjoyed, so they moved back. With her ideal life, marriage, and grades, Emily has always been the golden child. The comparison began in our early years and has continued ever since. I love my sister, don't get me wrong, but sharing a home has been difficult. Since I work from home the majority of the time, my folks are always watching me. They keep an eye on who I speak to on video conversations, when I start work, and when I take breaks. They have persuaded themselves that this degree of engagement in my life is both required and typical. Even though my precise schedule is shown on the refrigerator, my mother frequently interrupts me in my home office during crucial meetings, saying she forgot I was working. Michael, my 29-year-old lover, lives across the nation. He has been tremendously supportive over our 3 years of long-distance dating. But he and our relationship were never accepted by my parents. They treat James as the son they never had and compare him to him all the time. They attack every aspect of Michael, including his choice to live on the West Coast, his work as a software engineer, ironically, the same field as myself, and even his attire when we video chat. James has always been cordial, not only as his wife's sibling but also as a little sister. We had a good relationship and I valued having someone who didn't criticize me all the time. He frequently defended me during family dinners when my parents began their routine comments about my life choices, as if he understood the burden I was under. Up until 2 weeks ago, everything was in control. With solemn faces, my parents summoned me into the living room. I was managing a group of developers on a significant software update during a pivotal project phase, so the timing couldn't have been worse. On my laptop, they said, they discovered offensive text that purportedly demonstrated my attempt to conduct an affair with James. I was caught completely off guard. The messages they displayed to me were obviously fake and completely out of context. Some appeared to be completely made up, while others were excerpts from business exchanges that had been altered to appear suggestive. I attempted to explain that I'm really in love with Michael and that James is like a brother to me, so I would never do anything like that. They wouldn't look, even when I promised to show them my actual message history. They refused to pay attention. I've always envied Emily's happiness, my mother said, sobbing. And she should have anticipated this because of my rebellious nature. I was a disgrace to the family, according to my enraged father. In the midst of the largest project of my career, they gave me a 24-hour notice to leave the house, a 24-hour notice to pack up my entire existence. I called my grandparents in tears and desperation. They have always been my refuge and our family's sane voice. They immediately believed me after I showed them the actual mails and gave them all the details. They took me in, provided me with housing, and helped me get through this ordeal. In order for me to continue working, my grandfather even assisted me in setting up a makeshift home office in their spare room. My father was furious to learn that I was staying with them. When I wasn't there, he actually came to their house and yelled at them for enabling me and undermining his authority. My father became even more irate when my grandfather refused to back down and stood up for me. Declaring he would never talk to them again, he stormed away. I was devastated to see my grandfather, who is normally composed, trembling with rage following that altercation. When my father began getting in touch with my place of employment, things got worse. He made outrageous charges about my inappropriate behavior and unstable mental state in emails he sent to my manager and the Human Resources Department. He even made an attempt to persuade them that I was giving competitors access to company secrets. Fortunately, my manager has been understanding and my work history speaks for itself. However, the strain is having an adverse effect. It has been embarrassing for me to have to explain these private matters to my staff. Then my granddad unexpectedly died yesterday. The agony is intolerable. He was more than simply my grandfather. He was also my confidant, my guardian, and the one who always had faith in me. The fact that my parents did not attend the funeral only makes it worse. They had left town. Later, when I was organizing my grandfather's funeral, I discovered through my cousin that they were actually on vacation, sharing photos from a beach resort on Facebook. Every happy picture they shared made my heart ache. Taking an emergency leave of absence from his job, Michael flew in to support me during this trying period. My parents appeared out of nowhere as soon as he got to my grandparents' house. As though Michael's presence was somehow improper, my father icily inquired as to why he was there. I eventually lost my temper at that point. I asked them who they believed had taken care of all the funeral planning, who had supported Grandma during her most trying time, who had stayed up late planning the ceremony, calling family, and interacting with the funeral home while they were taking selfies on the beach. Then, in an unsettling development, my father's entire personality altered. A disturbing peace took the place of the rage in his eyes. He became oddly calm and said he wanted to forgive me for what had happened with James and let the past be the past. He said he would let me stay with Grandma, but only if he got what was rightfully his. I understood exactly what he was after, therefore I was horrified by the abrupt change in his demeanor. My grandfather had been quietly successful with his investments over the last few years. My father desired his inheritance because he had accumulated a sizable nest egg. He had the gall to come and demand money after everything they had done to us and after leaving us during the funeral. He was unaware, however, that Grandpa had anticipated this. While organizing Grandpa's study the day following the death, we discovered a note hidden in his desk drawer. All it said was, "Call Bob." Bob, who had visited him multiple times over the years, was both his lawyer and an old friend. We found out that Grandpa had left everything to me when we got in touch with him. I now owned every cent of his savings. Grandma would always have a place to live, protected from anyone who would try to take it away from her, thanks to the house being signed off to her. My father broke his cool exterior when I told him this. As he accused me of controlling Grandpa and turning him against his own son, his face flushed with anger. He went on a tirade about how he deserved his parents' money and how he had always supported them. He was the one who had left his family to pursue his greed, so it was almost comical that he was accusing me of deception. In an attempt to persuade me, my mother said things like, "Didn't you try to take away your sister's happiness? You now wish for us to suffer as well." However, I refused to back down. Grandpa had made up his mind, and I was going to respect it. I clarified that Grandpa had only recognized where their priorities lay and that Bob, his attorney, could confirm all I said. I also said that there was no conspiracy. The tension in the air was oppressive as they departed. As I watched them leave, I felt both relief and grief. Relief that Grandpa had kept us safe even when he was not around, and sadness that my connection with my parents had reached a breaking point. I'm now concentrating on reconstructing my life and caring for Grandma. Throughout it all, Michael has been amazing, offering consolation and support when I needed it most. However, I can't help but wonder whether there was anything I could have done differently to avoid all of this suffering. Reddit. I realize this post is lengthy, but I had to get everything out. Everything has become more problematic because of the inheritance situation, and I'm worried that my parents might try something extreme. I would be grateful for any guidance on legal protection. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation? How did you respond to it? Update 1. Things took a turn for the worst a few days after my last update. Apparently not satisfied with simply pestering my workplace, my father has begun reaching out to our company's customers. I learned this when a representative from one of our largest clients pulled me aside in a virtual meeting to voice concerns about upsetting emails they had received about me. These emails were kindly forwarded by them. My father was methodically attempting to damage my work relationships after he somehow managed to obtain our client list. According to the emails, I was a volatile individual who was stealing business secrets and taking advantage of older family members for financial gain. The fact that he disclosed information regarding customer projects that he shouldn't have known about is very troubling. Now, since he works for a partner company, I'm wondering if James was giving him false information. The legal department of my business has been engaged. In addition to the possible harm to my reputation, they are taking this extremely seriously because my father's activities are endangering business partnerships. My parents received a cease and desist letter from them, which only appears to have made them more angry. My parents have responded by launching a full-scale campaign against me on social media. In order to disseminate their story, they have made numerous phony personas in addition to publishing on their own ones. The stories they are narrating are getting more complex. They now assert that I have been deliberately deceiving my grandfather for years and that I somehow planned out his whole investing strategy to suit my own interests. They are unaware that I discovered something startling while looking through more of Grandpa's documents. Classic Grandpa, always the meticulous planner, had a secret compartment in his desk drawer that held a USB drive and a pile of papers. along with comprehensive documentation of what seems to be systematic tax fraud and money laundering through my father's real estate business. The USB drive included years' worth of email correspondence between him and multiple offshore accounts. I informed Grandpa's attorney, Bob, about these results right away. He wasn't surprised, which was an odd response. Grandpa had apparently been gathering this information for years, recording each dubious business transaction and suspicious activity. Even photos of meetings with well-known dishonest business people were included in the folder. Bob clarified that Grandpa had been assembling evidence but was holding off on taking action until the perfect time. A set of emails revealing that my father had been embezzling money from his own parents' accounts for years was the most upsetting finding. Probably thinking they wouldn't notice, he had managed to get access to their financial portfolio and had started taking little amounts out. Grandpa did notice though, and instead of confronting him right away, he decided to record everything. To examine all the evidence, Bob is currently collaborating with a group of forensic accountants. According to him, we have more than enough to possibly file criminal charges in addition to defending against any legal claims my parents might make. I have mixed feelings about this. While I desire justice, I still find it difficult to imagine my own father being charged with a crime. James's eagerness to return to my parents' house is further clarified by the evidence. He and my father exchange a number of emails about business prospects that seem eerily similar to Ponzi scams. I'm beginning to question whether the entire charge that I attempted to woo James was a preemptive move, meant to discredit me should I ever find out what they were doing. In the meantime, my mother has started calling my grandmother every day, alternating between threatening her and guilt-tripping her. The most recent strategy is asserting that my father's health is suffering due to the stress of my betrayal, and that I will be held accountable if anything were to happen to him. On Bob's recommendation, my grandmother, God bless her, has begun recording these calls. We've put in new cybersecurity procedures and placed security cameras throughout the house to keep ourselves safe. Bob suggested that I freeze my credit and assisted me in securing all of my accounts. When my parents see their intimidation strategies aren't working, he fears they may attempt a financial retaliation. My job has been suffering due to the stress, but in a surprising turn of events, this has improved my standing inside the organization. My manager has been tremendously supportive after seeing the proof of my father's harassment campaign. My application for a completely remote job has been expedited, so I won't ever have to worry about working from my parents' house again. Throughout it all, Michael has been my pillar of support. In a spare room at my grandmother's house, he has assisted me in setting up a safe home office with backup systems and secured communications. We're also talking seriously about his moving to a job nearer to me, but I'm concerned that this would make my parents even more of a target. To help me cope with everything, I've started going to a therapist. She is assisting me in realizing that I am not to blame for anything and that it is acceptable to feel both love and resentment for my parents. Processing the knowledge that the folks who raised you are not who you believe them to be is a difficult process. We are currently awaiting the completion of the forensic accountant's analysis. Within a few weeks, Bob continues, we should have a good picture of the scope of my father's financial crimes. I'm getting ready for whatever might happen next. My parents, who know me well, will not tolerate this. I appreciate your prior support, Reddit. I never thought my family's drama would reveal something so significant. Has anybody else learned that their parents committed financial crimes? How did you decide whether or not to report them? I'd really appreciate some advice on this. Update 2. Emily arrived at our home this morning without warning. As I prepared myself for another altercation, I saw a broken lady instead of rage. Her normally flawless appearance was unkempt, and her eyes were red and puffy. She broke down in tears before I could even inquire what was wrong. She sobbed and told what had transpired. James had been in Chicago on a purported work trip. Emily had flown out to his hotel in order to surprise him. She believed a romantic gesture may help ease her feelings of insecurity over their relationship. Rather, she entered his room and found him with another lady. It wasn't the worst part though. Emily insisted on seeing his phone during their heated argument. The whole story of our family was broken by what she discovered. The offensive messages that had caused me to be expelled. I never made them. To escape suspicion, James had kept one of his mistress's phone numbers under my name. Using my name as a front for at least 3 different women, he had been having several encounters. The most startling aspect of all was perhaps how our parents reacted when Emily told them this information. Rather than offering their heartbroken daughter assistance, they advised her to remain silent and try to resolve the situation with James. They cared less about Emily's happiness and more about keeping up appearances. To spare the family the shame of a divorce, they even advised her to forgive him. Then Emily found something much more unsettling. She discovered emails on James's laptop that showed he and our father had been involved in more than just family affairs. Together, they had established a number of shell corporations to conceal funds from investors and taxes. James has been directing contracts to these shells at exorbitant pricing by virtue of his position at his company. Accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands were found via the money trail. Emily discovered pictures of James having meetings with strangers, all of which were stored in a secret folder called insurance. James appears to have kept records of everything, most likely for protection against any attempts to expose him. Another realization dawned on me as Emily told me these specifics. Not only was the inheritance at the center of the recent harassment of my clients and workplace, but it was also a frantic attempt to discredit me before I might learn of their financial machinations. They thought I might eventually find their digital trail because I work in technology. My sister is currently residing at Grandma's house with us. She is working with Bob to document what she has discovered and has filed for divorce. In addition to harming James, the data she presented could have disastrous consequences for our father. She discovered certain transactions that were exactly in line with the documents Grandpa had been gathering. The irony of it all? For years, James had been living beyond his means, using the proceeds of these illicit operations to fund his numerous affairs. In addition to wanting to be near James's place of employment, they moved back in with our parents since they were having financial difficulties as a result of his extravagant spending on his covert life. Through all of this, Emily has shown incredible bravery. She has already discussed her findings with the FBI, who are especially curious about the financial fraud's global components. She has been informed by the investigators that this case may be worth millions of dollars. Our parents' approach has entirely altered. They are now attempting to argue that they were duped by James and were unaware of the true situation. However, the data points to a different conclusion. Documents we have discovered reveal that our father was the mastermind behind numerous of these plots, with James acting as the front man for his business. Emily is suffering from the stress of it all. For the first time in our adult lives, we have been spending evenings discussing things, and she has begun visiting her own therapist. She has repeatedly expressed regret for not trusting me and for allowing James and our parents to influence her. Since she was just as much a victim of their manipulation as I was, I have forgiven her. Grandma has been incredible during this entire ordeal. She said Emily needed the master bedroom more than anyone else at the moment, so she gave it to her. We've resumed having dinners as a family, just the three of us and Michael when he comes over. It's amazing how tragedy can unite people and forge new ties from the ashes of past ones. Our cooperation is complete, and the FBI inquiry is still going on. Our parents are still working to preserve their reputation in the neighborhood and have engaged pricey attorneys, but more people are discovering the truth every day. Our father's former business partners have begun to come out with their own accounts of dubious activities. Sometimes Reddit, the reality is more amazing than you might think. I'm finally with my sister again, and we're stronger together than we were before. We're getting ready for what is probably going to be a protracted court struggle, but at least we're doing it together as a family. A true family founded on support and truth rather than deceit and manipulation. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation where revealing a single family secret revealed a whole network of dishonesty? How did you handle the fallout? Update 3. The pace of progress has exceeded everyone's expectations. The FBI intervened last Friday morning when my father and James were enjoying their customary business breakfast at their preferred high-end eatery. I will never forget the expressions on their faces as they were carried out in handcuffs, directly in front of the city's most affluent business community. In an instant, their meticulously constructed image of prosperous business people fell apart. Teams attacked their offices, our parents' home, and a number of storage units we were unaware existed as part of the coordinated raid that took place in numerous locations at once. They discovered proof of a 3-continent money laundering scheme, offshore account details, and decades worth of fake documents. Over $50 million is the preliminary estimate of the whole scam. However, that wasn't even the most fulfilling aspect. Do you recall the pictures James had saved for insurance? As it happens, he wasn't the only one who kept records. 3 of his ex-girlfriends came forward with pictures, emails, and text conversations dating back years. They had been silently constructing their own case and were all aware of one another. The finest aspect. For months they had been collaborating with the FBI. James's recent business travels were watched, and every transaction was recorded. As one might anticipate, my mother's response to the arrest was quite predictable. She made an effort to play the victim by saying she was unaware of their illicit actions. When the FBI disclosed that they had recordings of her actively engaging in money laundering through her charitable foundation, that story completely collapsed. All those lavish galas she held to raise money. Simple plots to wash up shady finances. There has been extensive media coverage. The story was carried by all local news channels and even by several national ones. Prominent businessmen and son-in-law arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The headlines continued to appear. Overnight, my father's meticulously cultivated reputation as a community leader and benefactor was destroyed. The reaction from their social circle was fast and harsh. Those who once admired them at charity functions now act as though they had never met them. Their church requested that they resign from all committees, and the country club canceled their membership. In an effort to protect their own reputations, former business partners are going out of their way to assist the authorities. James's business quickly distanced itself from the situation. He was fired right away, and they are completely assisting with the investigation. As it seems, he had also been defrauding them by inflating contracts and keeping the difference for himself. His name has become poisonous in the sector, and his professional reputation has been utterly wrecked. What the forensic accountants at the FBI discovered made me laugh aloud. Grandpa left that property in the trust in Florida. It was more than simply a dilapidated house. It held the secret to their whole scheme. Grandpa had purchased it especially to serve as evidence after learning that it was being used as a front for money laundering. He was aware that the property inquiry would reveal everything if they attempted to challenge the will. Even from the afterlife, he played them like a chess master. James and my father both agreed to plea bargains last week. The punishment is severe. My father will serve 15 years in federal prison, James will serve 12 years, and all assets related to their crimes will be forfeited. For the remainder of their lives, they will both be making restitution. Next month, my mother will be sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison for her involvement in the money laundering conspiracy. After all of this, Emily is stronger than ever. She started her own business with the settlement, which was the little money left over after asset forfeiture, once the divorce was finalized. We've never been closer since she moved into a comfortable apartment close to Grandma's house. Our parents worked very hard to sever the sister link, but it has since become indestructible. There was more karma to come. Do you recall how my parents attempted to ruin my reputation in the workplace? The board of my organization was so pleased with my handling of the matter that they elevated me to the position of Director of Security Operations. I now oversee a group of people that work to stop the exact type of scam that James and my father perpetrated. Last month, Michael relocated here, and we recently purchased a home a few blocks away from Grandma. By the way, she's doing fantastically. She used her experience to help others by starting a support group for families impacted by financial fraud. What about the valuable social standing of my mother? When I last heard from her, her old pals were openly avoiding her while she was shopping at the bargain grocery store. Her friends have made it apparent that she is no longer welcome in their group, and her expensive jewelry and clothing have all been confiscated. According to Reddit, justice isn't always served without flawless karma. Despite going through a lot, my family has emerged stronger, closer, and wiser. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me along the way. And to everyone who has experienced similar betrayals in their family, never give up. When the truth finally surfaces, it's a magnificent moment.